If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment for more videos like this.
Have you ever experienced something truly paranormal as a child? Or has your child claimed to see something scary? What's your story?
When I was 17, I saw a full-bodied apparition while on a paranormal investigation of Susan Hospital in Rapid City, South Dakota. It was on the second or third floor, which were both unused at the time of the investigation. We were about to get on the elevator to go back downstairs to finish the night, and just before the door closed, I saw a little girl in a red and white checkered dress. At first I thought a kid had wandered up here from the active clinic below, but then I noticed she had big black holes where her eyes should be. Then she pulled away down the hall. When she did, her hair had this weird delay to it as if she were underwater or something. The whole thing lasted maybe 2 seconds, but it freaked me out. The creepiest part was that the security escort described what she looked like without me saying any details about the girl. That place is insanely haunted. The cleaning guys wear sunglasses with blinders like horses because the penny loafer lady, a nurse as tall as the doors, probably 8 feet, just hangs out in random doorways. The security guy showed me his book with resignations from various staff on their first days. The place is crazy. I remember this as if it were yesterday. I'm 28 now, but when I was 5, I and my parents lived in a 2-story house out in the country surrounded by cornfields. One night I was downstairs watching TV with my parents. All the lights were off in the house. I went upstairs to grab a toy, and when I went up there, I saw a dark figure holding a flashlight. The light was pointed at me, and it moved left and right as if whoever was holding it was obviously startled by me coming up there. Again, the lights were off, so I know this wasn't just a figment of my imagination. The flashlight was very bright too. I was scared shitless. I ran downstairs as fast as I could, screaming, and told my parents someone was up there. My dad grabbed a baseball bat and went up to check. He turned the lights on, and nothing was there. The window was shut, and even if it had been open, there was nothing aside from a ladder that they would have needed to bring themselves to get up there. The only way in or out would have been by the stairs. And the living room was directly at the bottom of the stairs, so that's out of the question too. My parents found nobody up there and just chalked it up to an overactive imagination. I'm an only child, and I did have a pretty active imagination. But I swear on everything that what I saw was real, and I think of it often in my life because it still blows my mind to this day wondering who or what it was. I know what I saw was real, and I sound like a crazy person, but it happened. I think I saw a demon as a child. As a kid, I was raised Lutheran and attended Lutheran school. As most Christian denominations teach, I was taught that paranormal activity is demons disguising themselves as friendly spirits to take advantage of vulnerable people and possess them. I still believe in this, and I've had very minimal paranormal experiences in my life, but there's one that has always stuck with me. I believe I was 8 or 9 years old when this happened. I was sleeping in bed with my mom one night while my stepfather was working. I woke up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom. My mom's bathroom had 2 decent-sized windows in it, one of which was directly across from the toilet. The foot of my mom's bed was facing the bathroom door, and I could see the windows while I was lying in bed. From the windows you could only see the wood line that ran beside our house and our backyard with a pond and small dam. I hopped out of bed and walked to the bathroom door. I felt an odd sense of anxiety walking to the bathroom. I was afraid of the dark, but the windows in the bathroom did let in a good amount of light, even at night. When I got to the threshold, I looked out of the window across from the toilet, and in the bottom left corner I saw a black head/face with 2 horns, possibly ears. On the top of the head. There were no eyes, no mouth, or anything. Just the shape. While I was looking at it, it quickly darted downward to the ground level and disappeared. This is the only paranormal experience that I've had where I can remember it so clearly. The only other similar experiences I've had are hearing noises and footsteps when I was home alone, which I usually chalked up to me being paranoid. Has anyone else seen something like this? My son scares me. Hey everyone. My child scares me. There have been a few incidents, but I will share the very first with you. About 2 to 3 years ago, my son, who was 4 at the time, was lying in my bed with me, and we were trying to fall asleep. He was doing the usual kid thing when they were fighting their sleep. Rolling around, speaking gibberish, playing with his hands. Then all of a sudden he stops, and I feel him sit up in the bed. I am pretending to be asleep, so I just stay still and quiet. Then I hear him having a conversation, but I can only hear his side. What did you say? What? I'm trying to go to bed. You go get it, it's downstairs. That way. No, I'm trying to sleep. You go downstairs. What? I can't hear you. Come here. And that's when I jumped out of bed and flipped the bedroom light on because he is not about to invite whatever this thing is into bed with us sobbing, and I asked him, "Buddy, who are you talking to?" And he points in the corner of the room and says, "Over there," and I say, "Baby, I cannot see who it is. You need to tell me who it is. Is it a boy or a girl?" The child looks at me and says, "Monster." I had a moment where panic ran through me, but growing up, I had many paranormal experiences myself, so I sat with him, and I asked him, "Do you want the monster to leave you alone?" And he said, "Yeah," so I had him repeat after me, and we told the monster to go away and that he was not welcome to be in our home. My son decided to end it with, "Yeah. Leave me alone." 2 minutes later my son was sound asleep. I, however, was up for another few hours after that, lol. And this was the beginning of my child saying absolutely creepy shit. If you want more, let me know. I think I may have a ghost child in my home. It's something as recent as last year. It seems to be a small, energetic, white, human-like, fuzzy entity, for lack of a better description. It would zip through and run around. Before, I would catch a glimpse of it chasing behind my sister. It'll come and go. Some months it would be really quiet, but this month has been a lot of high energy. I get a lot of these visits sometimes from other spirits. They're not known familiars to me. I noticed more often they tend to visit when someone in my home is not emotionally well or physically sick. I was sick last week with a really bad cold, and as I was falling asleep, I saw the little spirit skip into my room, skipping across the foot of my bed. I didn't give it much attention, so I closed my eyes for a few moments and woke up to the tugging of my hand. Eyes opened, I could see the little spirit of what seems like a boy with no face jumping to reach my hand, sometimes tugging it because it is too small to reach the top of my bed, like he wanted to pull me down. I waved at him, like I didn't want to go with him, or let me sleep. I can't remember, but I woke up the next morning, still really sick, and I remember that happened, and it freaked me out. My house is a new construction from 2005. No previous owners, just nature before that. Can random spirits just show up? Or they'll see you and say, "I want to go home with them today." I don't know. I don't see familiars apart from in my dreams, and I haven't any kids or lost any. Kind of weird. I saw humanoid shadows in my room when no one else was there. They were tall. They would just stand there, like they were staring at me, and then move away. And no, it wasn't from outside. The angles it would be at make it impossible. I told my parents, and they're good parents, so they believed me. I even pointed it out to them, where the shadows were, and they didn't see anything. They got a pastor to bless the house. No, we're not particularly religious, but it was the only thing they could think of. I still see them to this day, just way less often. They only come into my life once every few months, sometimes even years. But that's only when I see them. Who knows how many times they were there. It started when I was like 9 or 10. I'm 19 now. They've never done anything to me, they just kind of existed in the same area and left. Kids seeing a little girl in our house. How do I handle this? I hope that some of you can offer insights or guidance regarding my situation. First, I must confess that I am a skeptic when it comes to paranormal activity, but I hope you won't hold that against me too much. Recently, my children have been seeing a ghost. It started with my 9-year-old daughter, who stated she had seen a little girl with dark, greasy hair and black eyes. I have to admit there are some characteristics of genuine fear in my daughter when we try to talk about it with her, or it's time for her to go to bed. As a father, I cannot discount this fear, which is why I'm reaching out to you here. On the other hand, I also know that my kids all go to great lengths to have sleepovers, have friends over, or all sleep in the same room to stay up all night watching movies. It's summer after all. Last night, my 12-year-old son and his 15-year-old cousin stated that they too had seen this little girl last night and described her head as shaking, almost like a seizure, and they were talking to it. Apparently this girl told them her intent was to harm everyone in the family, starting with my 9-year-old daughter. My 15-year-old daughter was with the boys last night, and while she didn't see anything, she does state that she felt a negative energy. The 15-year-old cousin also stated that he has seen this little girl before, a few years ago, and he saw her for about a year before he stopped seeing her again. My wife is all freaked out, and we aren't sure how to approach this. It's not exactly one of the parenting challenges we were anticipating, and moreover, we have never dealt with anything paranormal. So, I'm open to advice or information about what this girl may be, where she came from, how to get rid of her, or how to find some thread of tangible evidence that this is really happening so we can get the kids the hell out of here. When I was really young, I lived in a small brick house in Somerville, South Carolina. I remember always talking about a friend I had named Roger and telling my mom about him. I vaguely remember shadows moving at night but not being scared because I knew it was my friend Roger. Well, years and years later, when I was in my early 20s, I reminded my mom about that friend, and she told me something that actually creeped me TF out. So as an adult looking back, I just figured that Roger was an imaginary friend I made up because I was an only child and always wanted to play with others. When I asked my mom if she remembered Roger, she told me that on various nights after she put me to bed, she would hear someone running around the house and yell from her room, "Damien, it's bedtime, you need to go to bed, it's getting late," and then hear more running around, and she would go out into the living room and look for me playing with my toys, and no one was there. She opened my door and found me fast asleep every time. I still think back to how freaking creepy that is. So apparently there was a family in that house before us with a child who died somehow in it. I have no idea how the child died, but my mom told me that a boy named Roger lived and died in that same house. My little brother had an imaginary friend he called Little Boy that he'd always tell us about. He'd say his head was just below roof height, and he'd have to go under doorways when he followed him around the house or yard. On his birthday he wanted a little bike that had an extra seat so he could take the little boy with him. Mom asked him if he's so big his head is near the roof, won't he be too big for the bike? He said, no, he is little, his head is near the roof because his feet aren't on the ground. One day he drew a picture of a little boy with red all over his torso. Mom asked what he was drawing, and he said, it's a little boy. When asked what all the red was, he replied, that's the blood from when his daddy kicked him in the chest. I can't remember many other stories, I think he just grew out of it. It was quite creepy. Mom didn't tell us this until we were older. He doesn't really remember it himself. When I was little, like maybe 4 or 5, really small, I went to the little library we had in our apartment to read. I sat down and decided to investigate the side of it, where we kept our wrapping paper. There was a small opening, barely larger than a few inches. An orange scissor came out and tried to cut my hand, slicing the air twice, like how you'd hold a scissor and cut without cutting anything, grazing my finger once before disappearing back into the crevice. Thereafter, I got up and left. I was too shocked to do anything else. I looked before I left. There was no way a human or a burglar, the only person I could even think of to try it, could fit behind there, and they'd still have to come out, which never happened. So I just left. I don't think it was trying to cut my hand. The way it came out and cut reminded me more of a warning than an actual attempt to kill me. You know how some dogs bark and nip the air before leaving an area? They're not trying to harm you, they're just warning you away, so I got the message and stayed away. I was sort of wary of orange scissors after that. My mom had one, and I couldn't figure out if it was a spirit possessing the scissor or the actual spirit of the scissor itself asserting itself. I didn't want to find out, so I just treated it with respect from then on. I've had lots of different paranormal experiences. When I was 14, my friends and I went through a stage of meeting at an outdoor seating area within a graveyard. Weird, I know, but it was around 4 p.m., and I and another friend arrived first, so we went to take a seat when we noticed 2 elderly women already sitting. I instantly recognized them, as they used to live in the street I had grown up in. They were sisters, Betty and Joan. Lovely ladies. They were sitting smoking a cigarette and chatting away. They were flicking their ash in small trinket boxes rather than on the floor. I don't know why I didn't say hello. It had been a few years since I had seen them, as they had moved around 10 minutes away to another village when I was around 7/8. Later that night I got home and told my mom I had seen Betty and Joan today, and she went white. No, you couldn't have, I said. I definitely did and explained. Then she told me that they had died 3 years ago. Betty first and Joan 4 months later. The house I grew up in was very creepy. The bathroom was downstairs, you had to walk through the living room and kitchen to get to it. And it always felt like something or someone was right behind you watching you. One night I went to the toilet and was washing my hands when I felt someone right behind me. I spun around fast, and there was a man with white hair and a black waistcoat on standing behind me. He appeared to be as shocked as I was that I could see him, then disappeared straight away. The worst experience I had was when I was about 4/5, and I'll never forget it. I was lying in my bed one night just dropping off to sleep and had my arm hanging over the side of the bed when something gripped it and yanked it underneath the bed. It was terrifying. So many other paranormal things have happened to me in my life I could go on and on. My son knows things he shouldn't. This is my first time sharing here, so hang with me. I have 4 sons. My oldest is 6, and he's the one I'm curious about. Since he was very young, first learning to talk, he's occasionally said things that don't make any sense for him to know. We were on vacation with my in-laws at the beach when he was 2.5, and he had a blast in the water with my husband and me. The next day, we got up bright and early to go back, and he adamantly refused. He kept insisting that there were alligators in the water. We tried to reason with him that alligators didn't live in salt water, but he wasn't having it. Well, my husband had taken one of our twins, almost a year old, into the water, and they were playing. A few moments later, a man comes running from the pier, yelling at him to get out of the water and for us to get away from the water. He explained that while watching the water from the pier, he saw an alligator just underneath the water, stalking my husband from a distance. He called 911, and animal control arrived and were eventually able to locate and capture the alligator. It was 8 feet long. There had been storms during the night, and it was mating season. The explanation was that he was looking for a mate and had come in through a freshwater river that runs into the sea. But how could my son have known about that hours before it happened? Another time, I was going outside to do yard work, and he asked me not to go near the bushy fig tree because there was a rattlesnake under it. I thought it was just childhood imagination. I'm doing the yard work, and I go over to that tree to see if any figs are ripe, and I hear the rattle. I looked down, and I was about 3 feet away from a rattlesnake, and it wasn't happy to see me. I quickly got away so as not to disturb it further and hoped it would go on its way. He shouldn't have known it was there. Another time, we were going to go visit my mom, and he was asleep. We hadn't told him where we were going because she had a surprise for him. We got in the car, and he said, "You can't go this way to Grandma's because the bridge is out." We always went that way if my husband was driving and the bridge had been fully operational the day before. Sure enough, we get to the bridge, and it's taped off with a detour sign. He should not have known about the bridge closure because the information had not been communicated yet, particularly since my cousin, who is the local supervisor, did not inform anyone until after I called him. I honestly find this all a little creepy because I can't logically explain it. The little boy from the woods is back. For context, this story took place about 13 years ago when I was 6 years old. I was at my aunt's house, and I, my cousin, 12, my older brother, 13, and my twin brother, 6, decided to go play in the woods. We did this a lot as kids, so it wasn't out of the ordinary for all of us to take off into the woods randomly. Anyway, my cousin and I went a little farther than the boys to this small cave we had found one time. That part isn't really important, but it is important to know that we were up higher than the boys. When we started heading back to where they were, the boys started throwing acorns at us, just messing around and having fun. They had hidden in this old shack they found, so we couldn't throw anything back at them. Still, nothing weird or out of the ordinary, just kids playing. Suddenly, we heard our aunt calling for us. I and my cousin started walking down the hill toward the boys when they came out of the shack. Right behind my twin brother was this little boy, about our age at the time. He was blonde and wearing older style clothing. I specifically remember his shirt was light blue and his pants were dark. I was confused because I'd never seen this boy before. So I turned to my cousin and asked, "Who's that boy?" She looked at me confused and said, "What, boy? Your brother?" I said, "No, that blonde boy behind my brother." And she just stared at me and said there was no boy there. I know I saw a boy. But I never saw him again after that day. Fast forward to this past year, I moved into my old house with my sister-in-law and my brother. One night, it was just me and my sister-in-law at home because my brother was out of town for work. She woke up from a nightmare and started explaining it to me. She said that in the dream, she was sitting in the living room with me when we heard someone knocking on the door. She went to answer it, and standing there was a little blonde boy. She asked where his parents were and let him inside. As soon as she did, he launched at me and started attacking me. Then she woke up. I knew in my soul that the little boy she was talking about was the same boy I saw in the woods when I was a kid. I don't know how I knew, I just did. So I asked her, was he wearing a light blue shirt and dark pants? She looked at me like I was crazy and said, "Yes." I still don't know how to feel about this. Did that little boy follow my twin brother home all those years ago and just stay? And why is he showing up again now? It doesn't make any sense. Paranormal experience when I was a child. When I was around 9, I'm now 22, I moved into a new house. We didn't stay there long, maybe a year, because it wasn't a great house. On the first night we stayed there, I woke up around 2 to 3 in the morning. Everyone was asleep, and when I woke up, every single piece of furniture in my room was rearranged. To give some context, the way this house was set up, my room was between my brother's, 8 years old at the time, room and my grandparents' room. If you walked through the one doorway, it went directly into my brother's room. If you walked through the other door, it went directly into my grandparents' room, one of the many reasons we hated this house. So if I had to go to the bathroom or something, I had to walk through my grandparents' room to get there. So I wake up, and everything is completely rearranged. My bed was in the middle of the room rather than against the wall. My wardrobe was on a different wall. My TV stand and TV were in the middle of the room. My dresser was in front of my brother's doorway. I got up out of bed very confused and was searching for the door to my grandparents' room. The door had moved onto a different wall behind my wardrobe. I had a big mesh bag under my bed full of toys, and while searching for the door, I actually ended up tripping over it because it was now in the middle of the floor rather than under my bed. When I tripped, I ended up hitting my chin really hard on the ground, causing it to bruise. When I finally found the door, I opened it and looked out to see my grandparents' room was completely normal. They were fast asleep, and nothing looked out of place. As soon as I turned around and looked back in my room, everything was back to normal. At this point I figured I was just dreaming or maybe sleepwalking. I used to sleepwalk as a child occasionally. So I crawled back in bed and went back to sleep. I only realized it wasn't a dream when I woke up in the morning and saw the big bruise on my chin from tripping. Nothing like that has ever happened to me again, and years later I still think back to that terrifying moment. Has anything like this ever happened to anyone else? Or does anyone have any kind of explanation for it? Was I just going crazy, lol? I just really like some sort of answer to this. Thanks for listening to my long story. Did I see an elf when I was a kid? I was maybe 10 years old. Still awake in my bed, I looked at the door and saw a small boy, maybe 7 years old, with short, straight blonde hair, fair skin, and a red shirt. He had inhumanly large and slanted dark eyes, like those of an anime character or a gray alien from the movies, and was on all fours, just smiling at me with a mischievous look. It scared me a lot, and I felt it was evil somehow. I'm 25 years old now, and I'm still afraid of sleeping alone. I don't know what it was. Sometimes I tell people I've seen an alien, or a demon, or a ghost, or an elf. Could someone here explain to me what it was? It certainly looked malevolent, or at least mischievous, and it seemed to be non-physical, since it just materialized in my house and just disappeared afterwards. Just for context, I live in South Brazil, in a rural area. So when my daughter was around 8 years old, she'd climb into bed with me and my wife in the middle of the night a couple of times a week. Well, one morning after I woke up, she told me she came to our room and saw a tall, black, shadowy figure standing over me while I was sleeping. She said that the sight of the figure scared her so much that she ran straight back to her room and hid under her blanket until she fell asleep. This is in the same house we've had a handful of strange occurrences since living here. However, my wife feels as if I'm the target and have something following me throughout my life, which might be true because of numerous weird occurrences, but also, as a kid, I distinctly remember seeing a tall, black, shadowy figure move through the master bedroom of my childhood home one night. I thought I was just being a kid until I heard my dad's story. When I was a child, I had an imaginary friend. I don't remember much, but I do remember going down to the basement and playing with my cats and talking to a girl. I remember her usually sitting near the old washing machine. I forgot about her until I overheard my little sister talking to my dad about a recurring dream she had as a child that had her going to the basement and finding a girl who was leading her to the old washing machine. This is what made me remember the imaginary friend I used to talk to. I chimed in and jokingly said something along the lines of I had a friend who used to sit beside that washing machine. We laughed a bit until my dad told us about how I used to talk to my cats and seemed to be talking to someone else who I referred to simply as my friend. He then told us how he once saw a girl, who he assumed was me, playing beside the washing machine. He said that when he called out to her, she slipped behind the washing machine. Please know that the machine is pressed right up against the wall. He was startled and looked around some more. Nothing was there. I don't know if he was just messing with us to scare us or if he was being honest. But the fact my little sister had those dreams that stopped when she moved out is odd. I could be overthinking, but I need to know what you think. Little people my brother saw as a child. So, my brother is certain of this when he was a kid. In one house, which was our grandmother's, he saw little people. They wouldn't talk to him, they'd often run behind table legs and such. He can't picture faces or anything, but they would hide behind things and peek out, often watching them playing. He tried to talk to them, but they never responded. He can hardly remember physical details. When he tries to remember it, he says he feels like he is remembering a dream from reality, like he remembers the basics but not the details, about 7 to 9 inches. He remembers that they resembled people, but as a kid, he felt like they had an unusual hue to their skin color and were very slender. He asked our grandmother, who was a little freaked out, and she was just like, "No. Haven't seen anything like that." And told his sister, who also had never seen anything. They were very, very quick, apparently. Once he grew up, he thought it may have been a dream. At the start, it felt quite playful, but as he got older, he didn't like it. He got threatening vibes and started asking people about it because it was making him uncomfortable. It is only after thinking about it that he is pretty sure that these are things that did happen. The closest thing he has seen since was a video some of you may have seen, that likely CGI one of a little person running past a kid in a kitchen? Is it frequently depicted as a goblin or a similar creature? That is the closest thing he has seen to what he remembers. I'd love to chat with someone who has had a similar experience. My mother's house and two of the most extreme experiences I've had. I'm 30-some years old. I lived at my mother's house for my whole childhood. No one died there that I know of. The house was built in the 60s or 70s. Everyone in my house had experienced seeing shadow people. More or less I wanted to share my experiences because people that haven't had paranormal experiences look at me weird. When I was roughly around 10 years old, my mom and younger sister were all lying in bed. The bed was a bunk bed with a twin upper bed and a full-size lower bed. I was lying next to my mom, my younger sister was up top asleep. My mom and I were reading books and talking occasionally. I heard the floor creak and looked up at the doorway. There was a black figure, half of their body was in the bedroom, their hands wrapped around the doorway like they were just peeking in. It seems to be about 5 feet tall. The thing that I remember the most was its piercing green eyes. No one else in my house ever saw that one. The figure we saw the most was a tall, broad, male-looking figure. The reason I say male is because he was really big and wide. You never see anything beside his silhouette. When I was 22, I moved back after having my daughter to live with my mom to help with my dad. He was dying. My dad passed 3 months before the next incident. This figure was not my father. Unfortunately, I never got to see him. I woke up to make my daughter a bottle. I left the same room as in the above story and walked into the hallway leading to the living room. The living room has big picture windows across the room. The windows give light from passing cars, the moon, or any outdoor light. We were looking at the ground and shuffling through at about 2 or 3 a.m. and looked up and saw the tall, dark silhouette standing about 3 feet from me. He was really big and wore a fedora, wide-brimmed hat. I ran to the kitchen and hit the closest light. And he was gone. I didn't think paranormal, I thought intruder. My mother and sister still live there. They experience random things occasionally. No one has ever hurt us. Has anyone ever experienced a piercing green eyes shadow figure / ghost or tall brimmed man? An entity in my son's room? I'm really freaked out. I'm a very skeptical person. I genuinely didn't believe ghosts or spirits or anything like that existed for a long time but have recently experienced some odd stuff. TLDR at the end. My boyfriend was also present during the main incident. It happened in our child's room. For context, our 4-year-old son's room is located directly across the hall from our room, and we can see it from our bed. In my son's room, there are some jackets hanging up on some hooks on the back of his door. This is a detail that comes up later in the story. We've lived in this house for about 3 years and never had something like this happen before. So we're sitting in bed on our phones getting ready to go to sleep when we both hear our son jump out of bed and run across his room to his door. His door is like halfway shut, so I can't see into the room, but as I looked up, I saw the door move like he bumped into it. My boyfriend jumps up to go put our son back to bed. After a minute or so, my boyfriend comes back out of the room, looking kind of freaked out, and whispers, "He's fast asleep, he didn't get out of bed." I climb out of bed thinking my son is just pretending to be asleep or something, and I walk in to see him definitely asleep, breathing slowly, under the covers we tucked him in earlier. My boyfriend and I are both kind of like WTF to each other, wondering WTF just happened. We sort of just settle back into bed when something that makes this so much weirder happens maybe a half hour later. My son wakes up whimpering, and we get up to go check on him. He's pointing at the door where the jackets are hanging up and says, "There's a monster playing with my jacket." I flip on the light and look around, I can't see anything. My first thought was, maybe some sort of animal got into our house, and that's what we heard / what he just saw, so I look around the room, trying to see if there's a mouse or something. Our house is really small and clean, so there are not many places for an animal to hide, and I can't find anything. Plus, my son kept insisting the monster was still behind the door playing with his jacket. Additionally, the footsteps we heard were pretty loud and really sounded like my son, so it just didn't make sense that there was a small animal. My son wouldn't go back to sleep alone, so my boyfriend lay down with him so he would feel safe. This was such an odd event. My son never talked about monsters or being scared before this. It was so out of nowhere and so weird that we heard the footsteps as well. Ever since then, my son will sometimes wake up crying, talking about a monster in his room. I wish I could find an explanation for what we heard. If we hadn't heard the footsteps, I would have probably dismissed my son's monster claims and not thought much about them. Any ideas of what we could do or any rational explanation? I'm glad you asked. During my first year in Mexico with my mom, we visited my grandmother on my father's side and stayed there for a couple of days. One morning I woke up to use the bathroom, but everything is different in Mexico than it is here in the States. The bathroom and shower were 2 rooms like stalls next to each other outside the house. I went outside, and during this time the sun was just starting to rise. It wasn't too dark, nor was it too bright outside, but just enough to see what was around me from a distance, and as I was about to walk into the bathroom, I saw a dark figure, and when I say dark, I mean pitch black, like pure darkness, a figure of an animal. It walked on all 4s, but it was so black I couldn't even see any sort of detail, but all the other animals, like the chickens, horse, and donkey, I could see just fine except for that figure. It didn't have ears or a tail, just a body with 4 legs like an animal. It was a bit bigger than your average large dog. It walked behind the shed, and I never in my life saw it again. Some crazy shit, I tell you, lol. Another weird experience I had in Mexico was, I was in the bed closest to the window, and my mom was in the middle bed. And I happened to wake up in the middle of the night, and I couldn't fall back asleep, and trust me, I was awake, so I was just staring out the window while still lying down trying to fall back asleep, and I said something to my mom, and she was also half asleep. She couldn't sleep well that night either. And as I was staring, I saw rainbow lights from outside flashing onto the bottom right corner of the window, no noise or sound or anything at all, and I was there like, WTF? I was confused but amazed at the same time. It's difficult to explain, but basically that house is 2 stories and completely gated, and a wall blocks the view from the window, so no one from the street could have done that. Someone had to jump over the wall and walk down a bit to my window and shine the lights, but that wouldn't make sense. In the morning when I woke up, my mom was already awake doing chores, and when I remembered, I immediately went outside and checked, and nothing was there, no kids' toys or anything that could have caused the mysterious lights. Something I saw under the table as a child. I don't have any siblings, so when I was 5, 6, I used to play by myself a lot at home. I don't remember having invisible friends that I thought were really there. I would pretend I had a pony or that I had guests over, but I knew it was all for pretend. One day, though, I was alone playing hide and seek, pretending I had to find my friends, when I looked under the table and saw a small child. He was black and had wings. I was confused because this was not me pretending something, I was actually seeing someone. Some things, black people are not common in my country. I also knew people didn't have wings. My country is not very religious, and my family isn't either. I remember thinking, they won't believe me. Angels don't exist. I was not scared. I asked his name, and he responded, not an angelic name or anything, just a regular name. I invited him to keep on playing, and he was okay with that. I didn't see him again after that. Could I have been hallucinating for some reason? I don't have a history of hallucinations, this is the only weird thing I ever saw in my life. And I knew it was weird enough that I didn't tell anyone because I thought no one would believe me. I only told my mother about this as an adult. I just thought I'd share this, I don't even dare to share it using my regular account. I'm thinking it's possible I just hallucinated that one time in my life because, I don't know, my brain was still developing? Whatever it was, hallucination or something else, I have the image of that child engraved in my memory. Children know things. My 6-year-old daughter has always shared things with us. Sometimes creepy, mostly like WTF, how did she know this? I'm uncertain if this topic is appropriate, but I'm eager to hear about other people's experiences. Here are a few examples of my daughter being herself. Age 2, I just found out I was pregnant and had only told my husband. We decided not to tell my daughter about the pregnancy because I had previously miscarried, and we didn't want her to get her hopes up. One evening, we were eating dinner, and my daughter turned to me and said, "There's a baby in your belly." My eyes go big, and I turn to my husband and ask if he told her. He swears he didn't. I asked her if it was a boy or a girl, and she responded, "It's a boy, but I wanted a girl." Indeed, 9 months later, her baby brother arrived safely. The thing that gets me is that she told everyone at daycare. I was a bit nervous in case I miscarry again. Then one day at daycare, she turned to her teacher and said, "There's a baby in your belly, too." She laughed and said, "Nope, that's your mom, not me." However, a week later, her teacher came to me to inform me that she was pregnant and asked my daughter whether it would be a boy or a girl. Daughter said girl, and Valp, she had a girl. Age 5, My mom has a history of heart attacks. One day she went to the ER thinking she might be having one, but it turned out it was an AFib. I was a nervous wreck in the morning but was fine in the afternoon once I heard she'd be okay. I went to pick up my daughter from school. She was balancing on a table and fell backwards but was fine. I picked her up and said, "It was more scary than anything, right?" My daughter responded with, "Yeah, but you know what's scarier? Oma dying." I was like, "Why did you say that?" I didn't tell her my mom went to the hospital and we don't see her often. She was like, "I dunno," and went on her merry way. Age 6, last night my husband was putting her to bed. He came down and told me that right before she fell asleep, she turned to him and asked, "Have you ever been on a haunted train?" My husband was like, "No." I asked why that freaked him out. He showed me a text that his sister had sent 30 minutes earlier, which contained a link to a ghost train Groupon. I assured her that we should have become accustomed to it by now, yet occasionally she still manages to catch us off guard. Does the demon child wake me? Maybe. This is my second crazy thing I'll share here, and the only other I can't explain. A little backstory first. This happened around 8 years ago. I had a son around 8 years old at the time. So I put my son in his bedroom around 9ish p.m. We followed to our bed around 10 p.m. My bedroom had a large closet covering one wall with 2 large mirror doors, basically one full wall of mirrors. At precisely 3 a.m., a little boy at the foot of my bed awakens me, wailing. I'm thinking it's my son. I raise myself up on my bed and begin to talk to him and ask why he was crying. I remember he needed my help, but what he was asking was horrible. I can't remember what it was, though. I realized it wasn't my son. In fear I asked who it was and why it was there. Its form changed, nearly the width of a king-size bed and nearly touching a 10-foot ceiling. Its voice went to a low, raspy growl, speaking a language I didn't comprehend. I was nearly in shock at this point. I remember asking its name repeatedly to no avail. For reasons unknown, I demanded its name in Jesus' name. To my surprise, it responded with something resembling Amber or close to that. But it began speaking in a manner and language that I felt threatened by. I'm not a religious person but began praying, then repeating the Lord's Prayer with my eyes closed. It became furious. At that point my wife woke up asking why I was praying. I, still sitting up in my bed, opened my eyes, and it was gone. I asked if she had seen it, but her answer was no. She did hear the raspy voice and me praying out loud. So I know it was real. To this day I can still hear it say its name. Just the thought makes me scared to sleep. I'm asking for insight on this one also. I've never told my story, only to a priest. The priest told me it was a demon that came to me in the form of a child, trying to use me for its benefit. I really don't know what it was, and I'm glad I've never seen it again. Thanks. When I was a kid in the 90s, my brother, stepsister, and I were lying on our trampoline looking at the clouds. We saw something flying in the sky and watched as it got closer, trying to figure out what it was. As it got nearer, we realized it was a flying pink convertible car. There were 2 people inside, a man and a woman. The man was driving, or flying, I guess. They stopped and hovered above the trampoline, but way up in the air. The woman leaned over the edge of the car and waved excitedly. She had a huge, beaming white smile that seemed so friendly and joyful. Her hair was brown. The man didn't wave, and he slowly started flying the car away. We were stunned, but we all agreed it had really just happened. My brother and I talked about it recently. Not my child, but my brother. My grandparents had a guest bedroom that was basically never used, just a bed and a dresser. We grandkids didn't sleep there because it was far from their room, and we liked the TV in the living room. My brother, however, when he was 4, loved this guest room. He would go in there by himself and just sit in there and talk to himself. No one ever really cared that much, but one time my grandma asked what he did in there. He said that he would talk to his friend John. When she inquired about John's appearance, he accurately described my grandpa's brother, who had passed away before our birth. Not just the generic haircut, clothes, and glasses he would wear, but also that he was missing a finger. John had lost a finger to a snapping turtle. My grandparents never talked about John, because it was one of those family subjects that everyone just kind of didn't talk about. I had never even heard of John until years later, when my grandparents were telling the story to my parents. Another similar story about me took place at the same grandparents' house around the same time, but I don't personally remember it. I was told about it. My cousin and I were walking around the woods when we were like 7. There was a pond near there that we were walking to. Apparently, we saw a man who told us it was dangerous to walk by the pond and that we shouldn't be by it. We told our grandparents we were told not to walk by the pond, so we came back. My grandma asked what this man looked like, and we supposedly described John again. Someone stood outside my bedroom door all night. Before I left for college, I lived with my parents in a house that we all heard weird noises in, such as someone walking up and down steps when no one else was home, the TV randomly turning on, etc. After I left for college, my parents sold the house and asked me to come home to pack up my things to help move. All bedrooms in the house were on the second floor, and the stairs coming upstairs were located closer to my parents' bedroom than my own, so that the majority of the hallway stretched down toward my room. Maybe 8 feet from the stairs to my door. I spent the day packing when I came home so that when I went to bed, my room was nothing but boxes and my mattress on the floor. Not long after I turned out my light, I heard someone walking up and down the steps. I get spooked and turn my bedroom light on. My door is shut due to this occurring many times before. I sit up on my mattress and look at the door when I suddenly hear someone sprint up the stairs and down the hall to my door and stop just outside. I then hear knocking that starts toward the bottom of the door and moves up and down until it reaches about halfway up the door and stops. I didn't sleep at all that night. I kept my lights on and messed around on my laptop until the sun came up. I never heard any more steps that night and felt like someone was just standing there all night waiting for me to open the door. I always felt like the presence was of a kid, and the fact that they only knocked halfway up the door felt like confirmation of that. I still sleep with my door shut and actually make my husband sleep between me and the door. My daughter keeps talking to something in my closet. Since my daughter, 18 months, was able to wave, babble, and generally interact with people, she's been interacting with someone or something hiding in our closet. It started with waving. I made the joke that there's a ghost in there, but at the time I didn't actually believe it. Our dog likes to sleep in the closet, so I just figured she was waving to her. There was only one problem with that explanation. Anytime she waved, my dog was nowhere near the closet. Then she started babbling. She'd have full-on babble conversations with the closet. We brushed it off as her just being goofy. Sometimes she'd hold up toys to show the closet and then babble about it like she was doing show and tell. Now she's starting to use full sentences, and just this morning she looked over at the closet, said "Hi, I see you," and waved. This is the first coherent sentence she's said towards the closet, and it's a little unnerving. And again, my dog wasn't in there. She's lying at the foot of the bed. The closet is a small walk-in style closet. There's some built-in shelving up top and some plastic shelving we added, and the door is off the hinges and leaning against the built-in shelving because it fell off, and we need to fix it. There isn't a single thing in there that looks like a human form. I've always been a bit sensitive to these things, but more so when I was a kid. I like to think that if there was something in the closet, I'd feel it, but now I'm doubting myself. For context, we live in a trailer built in the 80s, not even an old house. As far as I know, the only deaths that have happened in the house were a couple of pets the previous owner had, and when my daughter talks to whatever is in there, she looks up like a tall person is standing there rather than a cat or a dog. I grew up in what my family, and my friends are now all convinced was a haunted house. Some of my earliest memories were quite terrifying. I remember, at the ages of 3 to 4, being in our bathroom and being paralyzed beside one of the walls. I remember being terrified out of my mind and hearing a voice talk on and on. It was sinister and sounded constant, like a megalomaniac just ranting. I have no memory of what it was saying. I seem to remember the situation happening 3 to 4 times before I was able to force it not to happen anymore. I don't know what forcing meant, but it was a mental effort to avoid that experience. It makes absolutely no sense logically, but that memory has just been stuck in my brain forever. If I and others hadn't experienced other horrific incidents in and around that bathroom and other parts of the house over the years, I would dismiss it as a faulty childhood memory. I slept in a room next to the bathroom, and I used to have the most morbid and terrifying nightmares when I was like 3 to 7. Stuff that I can't imagine my brain just conjuring up on its own. In one, I was falling endlessly through hell, which was this enormous cave full of flying demons. In some, I would have a false awakening and have a ghost lead me out of bed and down the stairs, where I would be kidnapped by Satan and held in hell with other children. Such strange experiences occurred. I grew to really hate that room later on. Other times as a kid, I would be in a room playing by myself and suddenly be overcome with this enormous sense of dread, or a feeling like I was being watched, or a feeling like something evil had entered the room. I usually left immediately and didn't wait around to see what would happen. I experienced paranormal encounters during my childhood. I have 3 very unique experiences from when I was a child, and I thought this would be an appropriate place to share them and hopefully receive some kind of validation. Story 1. My first experience was from when I must have been about 4 years old. My mom would tuck me in bed every night and close the door to my room. I always insisted on having my door closed, as I couldn't sleep if it was open. It would remain closed until I got up and left my bedroom in the mornings. One night my mom tucked me in and left the room, closing the door behind her. I fell asleep, then in the middle of the night woke up again. My door was wide open, and standing there completely still was a fully black cloaked figure that was as tall as the doorframe. I instantly tucked my head under the covers to hide and cry myself back to sleep. When I tell this story to people, they write it off as a dream, and part of me wants to rationalize it that way, but the thing that confirms it was real for me is that when I woke up again in the morning, my door was still wide open. I can't explain that away. Story 2. My second experience was over a period of a couple of months. This story was when I was about 9 years old. I had been having my usual random dreams as I normally did, all unique to each other and normal, apart from one thing. Near the end of every dream, I'd look down at my wrist and see a small line. Each dream it grew a little bigger, and I remember thinking it was a bit strange but didn't spend too much time thinking about it. That was until the last dream I had featuring this wrist line. In this last dream, the line had fully wrapped round my wrist like a bracelet. I don't remember the rest of the dream, except that it evoked an overwhelming sense of dread. When I woke up, I looked down at my wrist and saw that a tight rubber band from school had been left around it that night, causing my hands to swell like a bunch of bananas. This dream unsettles me, as if the line on my wrist served as a countdown to the moment I would commit this error. My final story takes place when I was about 12 years old. I and my older sister shared a room at this point, and it was just a normal day after school. It was just me and her in the house, and she went to have a shower while I was sitting in bed playing Xbox. Normally my mom wouldn't be home from work until about 5:30 p.m., but at about 4 p.m. I heard the front door handle being pushed down quickly but loudly. It was a very specific noise I'd known since I was tiny. When my mom would come home, I'd hear the key turn in the door, the handle go down, and then the creak of the door opening. But all I heard was the handle. I thought, oh no, Mom is going to be mad we forgot to lock the door, but then I heard nothing else. Eventually I went downstairs and saw the door was closed and locked. I still can't explain what that noise I heard was. It was a very distinct noise to me as a child. The sound of that old clunky door handle was nothing like any other sound that I could rationally think of. Anyway, they're my weird little stories that I still can't explain to this day. I think my 2-year-old son is being haunted or experiencing something. Need help. My son is about to turn 3 next month, and this started up a few months ago and has progressively gotten worse. At first he started with the ghost talk about how he sees a ghost, and my wife and I would ask where, and he'd point to it, but it didn't seem to go beyond that. Recently the past 2 weeks have kicked things up a notch. He sleeps in our bed with us, and my wife usually takes him to bed so I can do the nightly reset, and he started saying things like "Stop poking me, please stop poking me, or not on the ground anymore," and would stare directly at the ceiling. He's also become more irritable during the day and spacey, like he's in a trance or sleep deprived. I asked him yesterday if the ghost was a boy or girl or if it was a friend, and he said she doesn't want to talk about it. I tried asking a few ways, bringing it up in conversation, asking to draw it, etc., and he just kept saying he doesn't want to talk about it. This morning he said the ghost wakes him up at night, and I asked how, and the same response. When I went to the office to work, he told my wife he was hungry, and she was going to put him into the high chair, but he got really freaked out and said no because something was underneath it. Also to note, whenever we go anywhere, he usually has a good time but then gets really somber and asks to go home. Almost like he's tethered. As an exhausted dad, I have finally turned to this community because I feel uncertain about how to help my son or what actions to take for him. Who could have been knocking on the door when I was a young child? One thing I remember from my childhood was looking out the back door, which goes into the backyard. When I went to look out, I saw this man walk up to the door in a weird red outfit, unlike anything anyone else would wear today. Kind of like something I imagine someone would wear in the old medieval days or something. I remember being frightened, and as far as I remember, he didn't say a word. He just stood there and stared. I ran out of the kitchen and into the room to tell my grandmother what I saw. She got up to look out the back door, prepared with self-defense. But when she came to the back door, nobody was there at all. And my family laughed it off as me making it up or dreaming it, and for most of the years, I believed it was just a dream. Despite this, it has always been a memory that stood out, and I was recently telling a friend about it. She told me that it was probably a hatman, which is a type of shadow man. Although I know the figure wasn't a shadowy one in appearance, I do notice a lot of similarities, although I can't remember what kind of hat it was wearing. So I am curious, has anyone had anything similar happen or any idea what this could be, besides a dream? I am just curious what others would think about this experience. Something is messing with my son. I have a 1-year-old, perfect baby boy. I live in a trailer, so you can hear everything. It's quite pleasant inside, however, I did remove his bedroom door for personal reasons. So my room is right down the hall. My husband and I were fast asleep, and at about 2:30 I heard children's voices. The voices were not those of babies, but rather those of children. It sounded like multiple children were talking to him. I lay there for a full 2 minutes, listening with my eyes shut. I genuinely believed that someone was in my son's room. One sounded like it was singing, another voice sounded like it was playful but it was whispering, and the other was kind of just speaking gibberish to him. The moment I opened my eyes, my son let out a blood-curdling scream. He started crying, and I walked to his room. He's standing straight up in his crib with wide eyes, terrified. He's 1, he doesn't talk, but he's good at communicating otherwise. I took him out to the family room, turned on the TV, and he couldn't stop staring down the hall. And at the end of the hall is his room, and at one point this dark mass was just stagnant there and slowly went away. He eventually fell asleep, so I laid him back down. 30 minutes later he's crying again, and I can hear rustling around. Which I assumed was him. So I picked him back up and took him back to the couch. This kid is petrified of something in his room. He's always been wonderful at sleeping through the night, but lately some strange things have been happening, and he keeps waking up at the same time every night. Am I crazy? What should I do? I saw something as a child that scared the life out of me, now I just want to know what it is. I was around 8 to 10 at the time, so details may be a little off. Just as background, I used to live in southern Oklahoma. On my grandfather's land with my mother and my brother, we had a trailer about 200 yards away from his house, a couple of minutes walk at the most. I would take him dinner every time my mother would cook. So, one night after I delivered her supper, I decided to take an alternate route through the pasture instead of following the road to get back home. It's a little faster, albeit more creepy. It's mainly covered in trees except for a few patches where only grass and some bushes grow. As I walked along, I heard what sounded like a giant water hose turned on full blast and flailing around. I get scared and start to walk faster until I come upon one of the breaks in the trees, and I see the source of the sound. It looked like a giant pipe sticking out of the ground, and the top was moving sporadically. Not super fast, but enough to where it was unnatural. It moved just like a water hose going crazy and sounded the exact same. I was terrified, I just kept thinking, if I don't bother it, it won't bother me. I walked right past it. The moment I was a distance away, I bolted to my house. The next day there was a giant pile of dug up dirt where it was. Dark-eyed ghost boy. When I was growing up, there was enough family drama to make me want to scream. I spent most of my teenage years living with my older sister and her husband. She lives in a really old house in the downtown area of a city in Texas. Now this old house looked like it was about to collapse, even to this day, and I'm in my late 20s. It all started when I began staying with her. Her son, when he would visit, stayed in the guest room, so I just had a habit of sleeping on the couch because the room was typically taken. We had a long night of movies, snacks, and staying up as siblings do, and she eventually went to bed. I remember slowly drifting off, and just as I was about to give in to the comforting lull of sleep, there was an intense feeling that someone was watching me. Now, downtown isn't known for being safe. I was hoping that I wouldn't look toward her window and see a face looking in to rob the place. Instead, I was greeted with a short, pale boy with no eyes. He wore old clothes. They looked to be 20th century. The overalls and everything have a little house on the prairie vibe. He had dark hair and literally black holes where his eyes should have been. I'll never forget the wave of sadness that hit me. I began to cry. I can't even say that I felt fear. It was like I was thrown into a deep, instant depression. Finally, I was able to muster the courage to call for my sister. He continued to stare until she turned on the light. She refused to believe me that night. I was so insistent. Later, other things began to happen, and she started to see what I was meaning. Little things, such as cabinets opening and closing in the middle of the day. Doors opening and closing. Running through the halls. The back gate was left open, but, thankfully, her dog stayed home. One night, we heard knocking on the door to the backyard. We always used that door because the front door and side door weren't over by the garage, so it was just easier. Expecting her husband, who worked the night shift, to be coming for his lunch, she opened the door and screamed. He was there. Standing in the doorway and just staring as he did before. She also began to cry. That's when it got worse. The doors and cabinets opened and closed all day and night. You'd feel someone sit on the bed or the couch with you. Eventually, I took over the guest room until her son came to visit. I couldn't even face outward toward the mirror. Everything in me told me not to. So, I'd face the wall until I'd almost fall asleep and feel someone sit on the bed with my sister dead asleep. She also started seeing him standing in her driveway, staring out into traffic all day or night until someone would drive up. The last 2 times we came into contact with him were the worst. One happened when we got back pretty late from Walmart. We had a spur of the moment, midnight Walmart trip. We bought some groceries and food for all of the pets and came home. She stepped out into the garage, and all we heard were deafening screams. I looked over to see my sister also screaming as a handprint formed on her wrist, and she dropped the groceries. We left them until morning. The last and final time was unfortunately all for me. She worked at a World War II museum that was just a couple of blocks away. I volunteered there. That was also haunted beyond belief if you ever want a long story on that as well. Anyway, she came to pick me up since I wanted to sleep in on my weekend and come after lunch to help clean the place. She agreed and just asked me to be quiet because her husband just came home and not to wake him. I knew the drill. Drink some coffee, hang out, and text some friends. I paused because I heard the shower running in their bedroom. John never showered with me there. So, I peeked down the hallway, which had a direct view of their room. John was passed out. He wasn't even awake. I stood there for a moment, confused. Then I heard the running. Screams. Directly in front of me, I hear, "Daddy, no. Please." I was then pushed right into the door to the outdoor garage, and a whisper that said, "Help me," faded into my ear. I bailed. I ran outside just as my sister drove into the driveway under the garage. We never saw or heard of him again. She says it's been peaceful since I left her house. He has never shown himself again. She has a huge hole under her house where animals go all of the time. I am guessing that's where he is, and he showed me how he died that morning. I can say that I hope he is at peace, and whatever happened to him never gets shown to anyone else again. My childhood best friend lost her mind after something happened in my house. My parents had a friend who was a single mother of a child around my age, just a year older. Because of that, we obviously got to hang out together on multiple occasions for years on end. When we were around 7 or 8 years old, her mom let her have her first sleepover at my house. Everything was doing fine until the sun went down. We wanted to stay up late, so we snuck out to play after my parents went to bed. After a while of sneaking around, we decided we wanted to eat some cereal. I was going through a phase where all I wanted to eat was Cap'n Crunch. Like many families, we had our main fridge in our kitchen and another in our basement. At the time, our basement was unfinished. The basement, nearly the size of our entire house, boasted 3 concrete walls and 1 composed of large gray bricks. Our laundry room was in the top right corner, behind some wooden slat stairs, with the gaps between them, and against the brick wall. The laundry room was not a true laundry room, it was merely a corner containing the washer, dryer, and an extra fridge placed on a square of carpet that we laid out to provide a softer surface than the cold concrete floor while doing laundry. I was naturally terrified of the basement as a child because the corner underneath our wooden stairs had just a single light bulb hanging freely over the laundry room. The brick wall, which was to the right of the laundry appliances, also had a few huge bricks missing up by the exposed ceiling with all the creepy tubes and pink fluffy insulation. There was a crawl space on the other side of the brick wall, nothing really interesting, and I wasn't tall enough to see over it. But that didn't stop my child brain from imagining stuff on the other side. Obviously, I didn't go down there because of my irrational fear of the creepy basement. So of course, we open the main fridge upstairs and realize that we have no milk. My friend insists that she has to have cereal and that we should check the downstairs fridge. Immediately I affirmed that there was no way I was going down there. Especially because it was dark, late at night, and it was just the 2 of us. Somehow, though, she convinced me, and soon we were creeping down the steps. We had turned on the switch, but it was still so dark, since the only light was above the laundry corner, which was conveniently behind the staircase we walked down in, lighting the way through the gaps in the steps. Once we got down there, I felt braver than ever. I experienced a childlike surge of adrenaline, and I believed I was the toughest kid ever. I think my friend felt the same way, because as soon as we turned around and got to the laundry corner, we started sizing up the room in a that wasn't so bad kind of way. I continue walking to the fridge on the far left to get some milk, and she keeps standing there. At some point between my walk from the start of the carpet to the fridge, she saw an old pile of toys we kept down in the bottom right corner, straight ahead of the top right corner we were in. I had just opened the fridge when I heard her start to scream. I turn around, and she's standing directly across from me, her mouth is wide open, her eyes slightly raised and shaking, And she's doing what looks like high knees in place as she flaps her arms around. She is filled with pure fear. I scream because she is, and we're both up the stairs like darts. As soon as we reach the living room, she collapses onto the floor, kicking furiously. My parents come running, of course, and think she's having a seizure on the floor. When they scoop her up, they realize that's not the case. She just starts sobbing. They ask her what's wrong, what hurts. I'm just standing there staring at her with tears streaming down my face. To this day, I've never seen anyone as terrified as she was in my life. Horror movies don't even come close. They couldn't get any response besides a hysterical, "There was a man with a hat. There was a man with a hat." Until she finally calmed down to just crying. Her mom came and picked her up, and my dad went searching around the basement for some man with a bat. I received a reprimand for staying up past my bedtime, and that was the end of it. They put me back in my room, but that night I slept with the lights on. I didn't see her ever again after that. I didn't see her again for many years. When I did talk to her, years later, when she came up on Facebook, I found out she had been in and out of mental hospitals for years. But I've had a specific experience in that same house that makes me feel like she isn't crazy, but that thing made her crazy. We moved a few years after we had fully renovated the house, and I haven't been there since. But I did see him myself. A fedora tipped down so you couldn't see his face, a long trench coat, and what looked like dog-like paws with long claws. The description sounds incredibly peculiar. Just typing it out makes me think I might be insane too. My memory started a few months before my sister was born. I was about a year and a half. I have verified my memories with my mother. I also struggled with paranormal experiences my whole childhood, mostly stopped now, and if I do experience anything, I'm not afraid anymore. My first paranormal experience was when I was about 3. I woke up in the middle of the night to the feeling of someone touching my feet. I can vividly remember my balloon-patterned comforter. I had just started sleeping in a twin bed. I open my eyes, but I don't see anyone next to my bed. I looked down towards my feet, and I froze from what I saw. On top of my comforter, right at my feet, was a hand. A gloved hand. Just the hand in a fancy white men's glove. It was as if it noticed that I saw it, and it turned, fingers towards me, and ran with its fingers towards my face. I quickly threw the covers over my head. I could feel it crawling up to my head. I felt the hand crawling around the top of my head. I was terrified it was going to make its way under my blanket. I finally got the courage to jump off my bed and run to my parents' room. My dad came to check my room for me, and of course, no hand. I saw something in my room as a child, and I've thought about it ever since. Now that I am 20 years old, I realize that this event occurred 12 years ago. I live in the east of England, a place not typically known for ghostly sightings. However, I believe this community would fully appreciate my experience, as it has continued to disturb me since it happened. To give context, my room is to the right of the door, with a wall on the left. When you entered, a small snooker table for kids was in front of my bed, which was next to my bedside table and desk. Nothing else was in the room at that time, as it had just been renovated to be bigger for me as I was getting older. There were 2 windows on the opposite side of this rectangular room from my door, one directly opposite the door and another opposite my bed. During my childhood, I lived in a suburban town with my 2 younger brothers and my parents. To be honest, we lived in that house for 10 years, since I was 2, but nothing ever happened. But when I was 8, I remember waking up in the middle of the night and feeling very freezing. Considering I was only 8, these memories are extremely vivid still. I remember the tips of my fingers being so cold they were numb, despite it being warm enough for me not to want the cover. Weird, huh? This is when I panicked. Now, I used to be woken up by my brothers in the night quite a lot, as they're twins and they would sleep in the same room. So normally waking up, I would assume it was them messing around, but this time I knew something was different. I woke up on my back, and after feeling these sensations of coldness, I looked towards the door, and I can remember seeing someone standing in my doorway. Since I was only 8, my mom and dad used to leave my door ajar so they could come in to see me if I shouted for them without waking my brother up with slamming doors, etc. So the door being ajar and someone standing in the doorway didn't bother me, as I thought it was my dad or something checking on me. Added to this, my room was dark but not fully. This was due to a street lamp located on the road opposite our house, and since my room faced the front of the house, it was always in a type of darkness where shapes could be discerned but specific features could not. Therefore, all I could see was the shape of an adult. I remember saying, "Dad?" But no answer. Then it hit me that my grandparents lived around the corner from our house, and when I really squinted at this person in the doorway, I thought I made out the face of my granddad, so I called his name, but no answer. This is where things developed. After no answer to the first two names, I panicked and threw the covers over me like a normal child does. When I threw the covers over me, I turned onto my right-hand side so that my back was to the door and pulled the covers right over my head. I then did the typical child thing and counted to 10 in my head and then called out for Dad. I must have scared myself by this, as I then started getting more scared and shouted for Dad. My parents' bedroom was right next door, so usually it would only take them a few seconds to get through to me, especially if I was panicking and shouting like I was. But I shouted for a few minutes and got no answer. I then pulled the covers back slightly and looked over my left-hand shoulder towards the door, and the thing had moved. It was now above the side of my bed. It was in the same position a monk sits in when meditating, legs crossed, etc., but it was sitting on thin air, about 5 feet off the floor. I couldn't see any features, just that this person was an old woman, not my dad or granddad, even though she was about a foot away. Sounds typically horror storyish, I know, but that's what I could make out. I freaked out at this point and screamed. At that moment, my father rushed in, and the entity seemed to manifest a mouth, which it opened wider than any human could, before vanishing completely. My dad still says he found me in a massive cold sweat, shaking from head to foot. After that, I refused to sleep in my room for about 2 years, as I felt massively uncomfortable, as if I was always being watched. Again, typical, I know, so I slept in my brother's bedroom from then on. Now, as I got older, I passed it off as a dream, yet two things stopped this from being the case. I woke up on my back, only to be on my right-hand side in the fetal position when my dad ran in, which is the position he found me in. This surely also rules out sleep paralysis? The whole experience was completely linear, with no sudden breaks, as if I was waking up. I remember the whole thing like it was yesterday, despite it being 12 years ago. The second thing, which perhaps makes me believe this is something more, is this. When I asked to move out of my room into my brother's room, my parents were surprisingly okay with it. I had asked before the experience, but they would always say no, as they thought we would just stay up until stupid hours playing games or whatever, but this time they were fine with it. I found out why when I was 14, after we moved out. When I asked my mom at that age why she let me move into my brother's room, she said that she was uncomfortable with the room I was in and that, while we lived in that house, being the age we were, she didn't want to frighten us, but the elderly lady we bought this house from had tripped and fallen down the stairs, dying at the bottom of them and being found days later by a friend. Apparently her room was my room. Now my parents are both skeptical of any form of ghosts or apparitions, but my dad's dog, a Jack Russell, would spend a lot of time sleeping at the end of my bed as a child and would growl in the night sometimes. He also sat in the hall for hours, staring at the stairs. I never thought anything of it, as I didn't know what happened there, but now I know about the death, and the growling of our dog and his strange bouts of staring at the bottom of the stairs make me think this was perhaps a little more than a dream. Sorry if this was long-winded, but this case just adds to the many stories on here, and considering the circumstances surrounding the house and the vividness of that night despite my age. One night, I suddenly awoke to the sound of voices. There seemed to be 2 or 3 different voices, which occurred around 40 years ago when I was a little kid. One voice appeared to belong to a woman, while the others were for men. My brother was sleeping in the same room, in another bed. I looked at him, but he was calmly in his sleep. I got scared and got up from the bed. The room's door was always open, and I could see the light on in my parents' bedroom. I walked there and found my parents watching the news on the TV, so it was around 11 p.m. They noticed I was scared and assumed that, as a 6-year-old, I was just afraid of the dark. They let me in on their bed, watched the news for some minutes more, and finally turned off the television to sleep, letting me sleep with them between them in the middle of the bed. I fell asleep soon, and I don't know how much time passed, but I suddenly awoke again. I was sleeping face down, with my head turned towards the only window in the bedroom, and everything seemed normal as the usual lights filtered through the curtains. But I felt the need to look behind me, and slowly I started turning my head back. I found a small source of red light on the wall at my back, which was the wall in front of the bottom of the bed, in the direction of my feet, so to speak. It resembled the light of a laser pointer, but during that time, such devices were not available in this country, Venezuela. It was less than an inch wide and not so bright. This red luminous point or circle was like 2 feet above me but 1 yard away from my feet. I was there, frightened, looking at it when it suddenly started to descend. I felt a genuine sense of fear, but then I suddenly fell asleep again and have no recollection of anything else occurring afterward. I only remember the next morning, all normal. I never mentioned this experience to my parents, and I am unsure why. I was totally awake, and I could perfectly move during both experiences, first when I heard the voices in my room and later when I saw the light in my parents' bedroom. I have never had an explanation for this. This is not the only strange thing that has happened to me, by the way. My kid is seeing a ceiling man. My daughter is 2 years old, and I think she's seeing something in the ceiling above my bed. She commonly points at any man on TV/in pictures/in person and says Dada. Whether they look like her dad or not. All men are Dada. Regardless, she sleeps in my bed and has pointed at the ceiling while saying Dada. Several times. She does it in the mornings, afternoons, and at night. She does it in the dark and in the light. I have tried to see if shadows or anything about my ceiling resembles a man, and I just don't see what she's seeing. She also has this habit of fake laughing when situations seem tense to lighten the mood. For instance, if I'm visibly sad, she'll come up to me and force a laugh as if she's trying to get me to laugh with her to cheer me up. She has done that to the ceiling man a couple of times. So, it's a bit worrisome in those instances, but I'm not afraid of anything really happening. It is just a bizarre situation I wanted to share. Thanks for listening. I told my mother when I was about 3 that I didn't like the lady in the basement or that she kept trying to make me put my hand in the wall. She asked, "What lady?" And I said, "From the picture," and took her to the basement. Hidden away in a closet were a bunch of old photos and a weird, painted portrait, really old-fashioned. The woman was the previous owner of the house, which was not owned by her brother, our landlord. She had died in the basement while trying to do laundry, as she was advanced in age and stubborn about getting help in spite of her bad health. The portrait was apparently some family tradition. The brother had one, too, and so did his parents. A lot of her things were still in the house we were renting. After we found the portrait, I took her to a wall and told her the hole was there. My mom moved some boxes out of the way, and, sure enough, there was a hole about the size of a child's fist on the ground being covered. I still remember showing her the hole, vaguely. I also remember seeing the woman wandering around down there, in a sort of dreamlike memory kind of way. Super tiny woman, face kind of obscured by wrinkles in a way that is hard to explain because in retrospect it didn't look natural, but to a kid, she just had a weird face. And wearing a white nightgown with little flowers on it. Anyway, my mom had always been creeped out by the basement, but I played down there. I wasn't allowed to play down there anymore. Growing up, I remembered the lady in the hole, but nothing else. And she never discussed it again. We lived there for the rest of the year, then moved. My dad didn't believe in it. But it wasn't until I brought up the old lady when we were talking about the house, at 16, that my mom filled in the blanks. Which was crazy to me, because in my mind I thought the old lady who owned the house would just come over in her nightgown, and that she was just kind of a shit about the wall hole. She really wanted me to reach in there. Paranormal things happened to me and my family when I was a child. So up to my 6 years, my family, me, mom, dad, and little brother, was living in a 5-story apartment building that was constructed by the banks. We were the last apartment from the top, so no other apartments were above us, just the building's roof, and it was the first apartment we lived in before we moved to another one. Since I became 16 years old or so, when I asked my mom about the apartments we lived in, she would always tell me paranormal things that happened to me and to her in that first apartment. For instance, mom recalls when I was a baby, the can't walk or talk stage, on the coldest nights she would dress me up in the coziest, narrow-headed, and hard-to-wear wool clothes and then put me to bed, but to her surprise, she would find me in the morning naked on the ground and all the wool clothes off me, which a baby can't take off by himself. I even remember when I was in 4th grade, I struggled wearing this kind of wool clothes, and I needed help wearing it and taking it off. This phenomenon continued to happen to me until mom bought a necklace that has Echel Kursi engraved on it, a verse we believe protects from jinns. Just after that, all this was gone, and we moved when we got the money to do so. Maybe they're playing with me. I don't know. My mom would also recall that at Fajr prayer time, which is very early in the morning, my dad would go to pray, and she would be alone in the apartment along with me, when I was a little child, because I don't recall that. She would hear a lot of heavy sounds of cats and dogs barking coming from above, while there's nothing above us except the sky, not even a building is close enough that the noise could come from it. Furthermore, my mom recalls seeing a little girl in the middle of the hallway just standing there, but my mom ignored it because, as she says, she wants to show that she isn't afraid of them, otherwise, the jinn will harass her more. Last thing I remember about this apartment but aren't sure if it's related to the things above. When I was about 6 years old, my mom and dad went to the pharmacy and left me and my little brother in the home, but they locked us in their room so we wouldn't hurt ourselves, and we had this calendar that had this 2D picture of a family giving each other presents. So when my mom and dad left, the family in the 2D picture started to turn around and look me in the eye and smile in a scary way. I then ran and hid in the wardrobe, but my brother stood in his place bluntly, not even caring about what I did, and whenever I peeked through the wardrobe doors, the people in the picture would do the same. I was so scared I went into drama mode and knocked everything on my parents' desk to the ground lol. My mom's explanation for all of this is that when this area was constructed by banks, it was left empty for a long time until it was up for sale. Thus, people who committed crimes threw bodies there. Even after people moved to the area, my mom recalls that people in the nearby buildings would find bodies in their entrances until they made the area lit by lights all night, so the area was filled with spirits. I wanted to share some strange encounters I had as a child. I had 2 crazy encounters when I was about 4 years old. I am 24 now, and I still think about them all of the time. The first encounter was when I was in bed trying to sleep. Suddenly a human-like figure rose from the floor and stood there just looking at me from the end of my bed. It was short like a child, and I got the feeling that he was a boy. I got scared and started screaming for my mom. She came into my room to get me and she took me to her room to sleep between her and my dad so that I would feel better. The same exact figure rose from the floor at the end of their bed, too. I started screaming again, so my mom picked me up and started taking me back to my room. As she carried me down the hallway in her arms, I began seeing the figure following behind her. It was scaring me so much that I kept screaming and started thrashing around in her arms. She placed me back in my bed and left the hallway light on as a nightlight to calm me down. I didn't see the figure ever again after that. The second encounter I had was not too far apart from the night of the first one. I got up in the middle of the night looking for a pack of cheese crackers, 4-year-old me's favorite snack lol. I was in the kitchen climbing up on a chair to get to the crackers in the cabinet, and as I was turning to get back down, there was a short, alien-like creature standing in the corner watching me. It had huge eyes and a cape draped around it with a tall collar. For a few seconds, I froze in fear, unsure of my next move, as the creature stood near the kitchen exit. I jumped down and just darted past it. It actually moved aside for me, like it was giving me room to run past. I continued running back to my room and stayed there. I haven't seen it since. Could it have been the result of an active childhood imagination? Undoubtedly, it's quite unusual. My daughter sees things no one else can see, and she knows things she can't possibly know. My daughter is 6 years old. All her life it's been as if she can see things that aren't visible to us, and she knows about things we've never told her or things that are about to happen. My daughter is autistic and semi-verbal, so she can't always describe her experiences with words in a way that makes sense to us, but when she has been able to communicate her experiences, I've been unable to come up with a rational explanation for them. She has always, since she was a baby, reacted to things that we couldn't see. As a baby, she would watch, laugh, point, and wave at the void, while as a toddler and young child, she would crawl, walk, or run towards the void, attempting to grasp it. The only time she has ever verbally described what she was following, she said, blue lights and yellow lights. She sometimes has meltdowns because she's autistic, and she will often come out of those meltdowns by focusing on something moving in front of her that we can't see. My father-in-law, my husband, and her teacher at school have all noticed her playing as if she's interacting with an unseen child. She responds to others by nodding and shaking her head, demonstrating toys to them, embracing them, beckoning them to follow her, and clasping hands with them while running. When my husband asked her who she was playing with, she pointed at thin air and said, "That boy." When her teacher asked her, she said, "Wendy, like from Peter Pan." Once when we were walking on a street, she pointed and said, "There's a man you can see through." I assumed she was talking about someone's reflection in a window, but she was pointing at a solid wall. She waved at the spot she had pointed to, then laughed as if reacting to something. All the previous incidents could easily be attributed to an active imagination. The following points are more challenging to explain. My father was visiting, and when he was about to leave, my daughter said, "Grandpa goes in the blue car." My father's car is white, ours is silver, and we couldn't see any blue cars outside the window. Then my father realized his car wasn't starting, and he had to have it towed and call an Uber. The Uber was blue. My in-laws gave her a present for her birthday, and when she received it, she said, "The flower is broken," and didn't want to open it. When she finally did open it, it contained a children's porcelain tea set with flower designs, and one teacup was cracked right through the flower. Since she gained the ability to crawl, she has consistently avoided a specific patch of carpet. She would crawl and later walk around it rather than going in a straight line. There was never anything different about that spot of carpet, but she visibly hated it and couldn't explain why. My son vomited all over that exact part of the carpet last year. It took a little while to get rid of the smell, and it's still slightly stained if you look closely. She also did the exact same thing with my husband's shirt. Every time he wore this shirt, she wouldn't go near him and acted disgusted by him, even hiding from him. There was nothing unusual about the shirt, no weird patterns or textures. Then one day my husband was carrying my son while wearing it, and my son vomited on him. She once asked my neighbor, "Will you fix the window?" And when pressed on why, she just pointed at a particular window with a face like duh. The window was completely fine, no damage whatsoever, until weeks later when a cricket ball went through it. The strangest thing, however, is my daughter's apparent interactions with grandma. In the same period of time that she learned the words mummy, daddy, Mikey, my son's nickname, nanny, poppy, and grandpa, she also learned grandma. My mother went missing, presumed deceased, when I was 12. My daughter has never met nor been told about my mother. We have never referred to my mother as grandma, only by her name and mum. She has occasionally mentioned playing with or seeing grandma, and when asked if she means Nana, she insists she means grandma. She has drawn pictures of grandma, always with the right hair color and texture and wearing a shirt in the exact color and pattern my mother was wearing on the day she was last seen. I don't believe my daughter has ever seen pictures of my mother, but if she has, it certainly wouldn't have been in that shirt. I have been a skeptic my entire life, but with everything I've seen from my daughter, it's hard to remain completely skeptical. It's clear that I can't explain away all of the experiences my daughter has clearly had by just saying she's an imaginative child, because there are things she can't know that she somehow knows. I have to accept that my daughter might be experiencing the paranormal. I think the Hat Man visited me as a child, but my experience is different from others. When I was a small child of about 5, I had an experience I can't explain. It's one of my first memories I can vividly remember. I have thought about it for years and can't explain it. We lived in a new trailer home and had just moved in. I remember I still had boxes in my room because we hadn't finished unpacking. I woke up in the middle of the night, and a man with a long trench coat and a hat, think Dick Tracy, was in my room next to my bed. He was very tall and all black. I was not scared at all and, in fact, felt very comfortable and a sense of ease or safety in the presence of this man. He told me that it was not safe in my room and I needed to grab my blanket and pillow and follow him. I did as he said, and he led me to our living room. He told me to lie down on our couch and sleep there. I did as he said and remember him telling me to cover up and go back to sleep. I tucked myself in, and he told me I was safe now. He then floated backwards down the hall out of sight, and I fell asleep. When my dad found me on the couch in the early morning, the sun wasn't up yet, he asked me why I was on the couch. I told him the man told me it wasn't safe in my room and I needed to sleep on the couch. I remember him asking me, "What man? And where did the man go?" He searched the house and checked the locks and found nothing out of place. I have never had sleep paralysis, never had night terrors, and never seen this man again. When I searched for what I saw, others had seen the same thing, but it's always a negative thing. My experience was not scary at all. My experience was comfortable, and I felt at ease. Has anyone here had a similar positive experience with an all-black, tall, Dick Tracy-looking entity? My paranormal experiences as a child. So my childhood was tumultuous in a lot of ways, which I think made me more sensitive to the other side, so to speak, and I had some infrequent but very odd encounters that some of you may relate to. The first, and probably most innocuous, was an encounter with the Hat Man during a sleep paralysis episode. I was in the top bunk in my bedroom. I used to have this nightlight that was a plasma globe but in the shape of a dolphin, which would cast the room in this eerie blue glow. The bunk faced the door, so I had a clear view of it opening slowly as he crept in. He was taller than the door, probably 8 to 9 feet, so he had to duck a bit. He almost reached the ceiling. His body was made out of what looked to be a smoky yet oily black substance, and his trademark wide-brimmed fedora and trench coat were tan. He moved to a part of the room where he could easily watch me and my brother and just stood there for a while. I couldn't do anything, of course, and eventually fell back to sleep and chalked it up to a bad dream. Another experience I had was on a road trip to the Point Cabrillo Lighthouse in Mendocino. Lighthouses and the paranormal were my two biggest special interests at the time, and my dad's cousin told him about a crazy experience they had there, but I'm not sure of the details now. Anyway, when we got there, it was around sunset, so we could see the lighthouse in action. As we were walking, we saw a very disheveled man in an all-blue old-timey lighthouse uniform with sunken and bloodshot eyes, which weirded us out, but we didn't think much of it yet. When we got to the lighthouse, nobody was there, and the field next to it was full of deer. We watched the lighthouse for a while and then left. That night I had a dream that I was back in the field with the deer, only when we turned away, the deer had been replaced with oily black blobs. There was a gob of oil approximating a head, and then it dripped down from there in a string to the floor, where there was a big pile. There were maybe 20 deer, and all of them had been replaced with these blobs. Suddenly they burst into flames and disappeared. After this, these blobs would show up in my dreams, always slowly approaching me until I was covered in oil. The dreams would always start normally, usually good dreams, and they would show up out of nowhere. Anytime they showed up, I was filled with dread. The last time they showed up, I was staying at my grandparents' house, and my dream was in their living room. They showed up again, and this time I just yelled, "I'm not afraid of you," and tried to punch and kick them, but it didn't work. After a bit it seemed like they gave up, and it looked like the oil was sucked up by the floor. I never saw them after that. Over a decade after this, I was at a dinner with my dad when I remembered the lighthouse and the dreams I had. I asked him if he remembered the trip out to Mendocino, and he went pale. He said it was one of the strangest things to happen to him. He described the man, which I remembered, the odd feeling in the air, and then he described seeing exactly what I saw in the first dream with those black blobs. The deer turning into the blobs and setting ablaze, the terror the blobs made him feel, except, according to him, it wasn't a dream. My former stepdad was also there and supposedly also saw the same thing, but I cannot confirm with him as we have lost contact. After he discovered I saw the same thing, which he thought I didn't notice at the time, we were both on edge for the rest of the night. I still don't know what to make of this and try not to think about it much. I would love to hear if anyone has had similar occurrences and what you think of it. Thanks for listening. This stuff still kind of freaks me out. A kid that I work with sees and hears shadows. I direct a bunch of kids each year about stage theater, and one of my new kids this year experiences this. I heard it through one of the more senior boys, who said he noticed the kid who we will call John for the sake of privacy. He said that he saw John looking at something weirdly and leaning forward and went to ask what was up. John had said that he doesn't want to tell because people wouldn't believe him, but that he sees shadow figures around. He doesn't see facial features or anything, just the figure itself. And it eventually just vanishes as if it implodes. At this point in time they had been on the theater stage that we practice on and had said that he saw a shadow by the back wall. And he had heard whispering and was trying to make out what he was saying. Apparently something with an S sound. After he had spoken with him in more detail, he told me that, apparently, it started when he was a kid, and he hadn't thought much of it, but later that day he had gone over to a relative's place and saw a picture of his great-grandfather that looked oddly like the shape of the shadow. However, it's not just one shadow he sees. He sees multiple. Bringing it back to the present day, when asked what he sees right now in the theater, he said he sees one by the back wall and one by one of our props, which was a fountain. One by the back exit and one in the audience. They never do anything to him, and he has experienced this for so long that it doesn't bother him anymore. Apparently when he closes his eyes to go to sleep, he still hears them whisper. But it doesn't bother him, as he's used to it. This is where things get a little more interesting. The boys do bonding activities. It's an all-boys school, where they share their honest highs and lows. And apparently when someone is upset or sad, the shadows converge on them. The boys gathered in a circle to share their personal narratives. The shadows stand around or behind the kid who is at that moment sharing the sad story. Or in a sad state. Which is a reason John doesn't want to speak to anyone regarding this, because he says it helps him figure out when someone is sad and that he can try to help them. And finally, the senior kid had spoken to John in the wing, the space between two curtain lines in the theater, and said that he wanted to test something. And sat across from John and started saying a sad story to see if a shadow appeared behind him. And he slowly noticed John's eyes start to move away from him and back to him as if he were distracted. He had stopped the story and asked if there was something behind him right now. John nodded to say yes. And the senior kid said, "What if I try to touch it?" John had shrugged. With the understanding that John would do something if he got possessed, he tried to walk to the spot where John said the shadow was standing. He said he felt a little chill, which could just be because of the fact that he was doing something a little scary, and nothing more. I wanted to know if anyone has any ideas or similar experiences that could help figure out how to help this kid. I was initially thinking it could be a form of psychosis, but he would rather not seek help. I don't think it's my job to force it upon him. So I'm open to any ideas you may have. Unexplainable and creepy events that happened as a child. I'm afraid to share my experiences here, which may sound silly, but I rarely shared these stories with anyone for the sake of not sounding crazy and to avoid breathing life back into it. It feels like I'm sworn to secrecy, but I want some closure. And after reading some experiences here, I feel like maybe I might be heard out. I don't know if it was one thing or several. Around the ages of 8 to 9, I lived in a little trailer with my abusive family. We had a large backyard that was part field and open to the woods. It was rural Georgia. During this time I had some strange occurrences happen to me that today I still can't explain. Since it's been so many years, my memory is hazy on some of it, but I remember distinct patterns. I remember when we first moved there, I was terribly afraid to be alone outdoors in our backyard. As soon as I noticed I was alone and my parents had gone back inside for their smoke break, I'd run to the front yard and then return when I heard them talking on the back porch. For some reason I felt like I was being heavily watched, and I would be filled with a sense of dread. I thought I'd hear footsteps in the woods, but I would be told by my parents that it was just birds or deer. Several years later, my mother informed me that I told her once that there was an older man outside walking by our road, but when she looked, there wasn't anyone around. I had apparently seen this from my bedroom window, which looked out to the front yard/road. I also used to sleep terribly. For several months I'd wake up around 3 a.m., without any explanation. I used to brush it off and go back to sleep and just thought it was weird it was always at that same time. And then I started feeling the strangest thing. As I was falling asleep at night, I'd feel my body lift from the bed. As soon as I'd doze back into reality, it felt like I was let go and back onto the mattress. I'd shrug this experience off as some hallucination caused by partial sleep if it weren't for the fact that at one time I distinctly remember waking up and feeling myself bounce onto the mattress and hearing the bed springs. It was horrifying. Even now I don't want to believe it and will try to come up with other answers to the mystery. I even had a nightmare once about a shadowed man, and I couldn't see his face or clothes, except that he wore a large brimmed hat and oversized boots. The scariest thing that ever happened to me, though, I still can't find an explanation for. I find only relief that as years pass and the memory gets fuzzier, I can try to convince myself it was all a dream. I woke up at around 3 a.m. again, and this time I heard a noise. There was a deep, buzzing hum that sounded at intervals. It's hard to describe as anything that doesn't sound cartoonish, but I was horrified. It sounded like it was right outside my bedroom windows. And then, after that quieted, I heard another noise. This is going to sound ridiculous, but I can only describe it as a gargling, clicking noise. Like if a squirrel decided to imitate Perry the platypus. And it sounded like there was more than one, and it was somewhere in my room. I couldn't tell if it was right by my door or behind my back, watching me and communicating with each other. I was so afraid I kept my eyes shut, pretending to sleep, and didn't move. I didn't know if it was aliens or a haunting or aliens with a haunting, but I couldn't go back to sleep for quite a while after the sound stopped. I didn't move for at least another hour, and I didn't tell a soul for years. It was shortly thereafter I had a little breakdown. I tried to talk to my stepdad about the happenings once, but he disregarded it and kept telling me that ghosts weren't real and that I was dreaming. One night all the paranoia and fear peaked, and I remember sitting in bed crying before I had to sleep and begging whatever thing was messing with me to leave me alone. Oddly enough, everything stopped after that. I can't recall any more paranormal occurrences that may have happened. After my mother got custody of my little brother and we could play outside together, I stopped feeling the dread, too. I really don't know what happened or how. I still feel silly for writing this all out for people to read. It's very possible that the stress of the abuse in the house led me to night terrors, but I remember it all feeling real. Maybe it was just some essence attracted to our negative energy. I'm more of a skeptic now, whereas a few years ago I would have sworn I was visited by an alien or haunted by a lonely man. I still can't fully disregard all of my experiences, though, even if I'm more willing to rule it out. I would appreciate hearing if anyone has ideas on what could have happened. Sorry it's such a mess. Above all, I believe my primary desire is to receive attention. Thanks for listening. The nightmare my family lived for 7 years, true paranormal story. What's up? My name is Jonathan, and this story takes place in Santa Clarita, one of the safest towns in America. During this story I was between 10 and 17 years old, now I'm 19. Some context, we lived in a 2-story house that had 2 rooms downstairs and 3 upstairs. My family consists of mom, dad, my older brother, my older sister, 5 dogs, and me, the youngest. The last thing my family believed was that my sister and I had a third eye since we could predict a lot of stuff, but for now we are only going over the spirits part of it. Now we begin. The experiences started pretty much right away when we moved in. One night when I was taking a shower I saw a little girl outside of it, looking at me. She looked to be around 6 or 7, she had long, straight black hair and was wearing white pajamas, but after that I got out, and she ran away, and I followed her. She disappeared completely when she went to my sister's room, and I actually saw her later that night in my dreams. She told me her name was Alice and she needed mine and my sister's help getting rid of 2 bad men. I agreed to it, but first she needed my sister to see her. So she played with my sister's stuffed animals, and then my sister asked me if I touched them. I told her it was Alice and that Alice wanted to talk to her. Of course my sister freaked, but she met Alice later that night, and my sister agreed to help. The last request Alice made was not to tell anyone else, as once I do, they will all be able to see the men and her. After that talk, I immediately saw one of the men. I went to the bathroom, and walking back from it, I saw a really tall, white-sheeted figure standing in the loft. He looked at me, and I felt so much fear, anxiety, and dread. He came after me, and I quickly ran to my room and closed the door. I cried hard, really hard. I couldn't stop because I was feeling pure terror course through me. After that I questioned if I should even bother helping, but I still tried. Time and time again I would run into him, and he would chase me. He never really made noise, but he would tell me to stop running. I never listened. It took a few more months, but I finally broke and told my family. They all believed me, as they were feeling the pressure from him and were all getting stressed from it. Well, after that my father saw the white figure. He was facing a corner of the loft and looked back at my dad, and it terrified him. For my brother, however, he never saw anything in that house, he only felt pressure, but he did manage to record my guardian angel one time opening his room door and checking on me. I'm still sad that the phone that had that video was destroyed in an accident. Moving on to my mom, she was actually able to communicate with the man but doesn't remember a single thing he said, as most of the memories in that house disappeared from her, mainly due to my mom's multiple mental illnesses. But my sister did manage to see my mom talking to the air, but it was weird. My sister heard a deep male voice with a lot of authority next to my mom. However, she recognized that the voice was coming from our mom, and it scared my sister really badly. After that incident, time went by, and my tia, aunt, and my nana, grandmother, moved in with us, and they had experienced numerous things. First, my aunt kept on hearing running upstairs when she was home alone. She would hear thumping and bangs and even two male voices talking. My nana, on the other hand, met Alice but sadly couldn't communicate with her. The last story with them is about my tia. She got up really early every morning to go to work, like 4 in the morning. And one time when she was going upstairs to use the bathroom, she bumped into someone so hard that she was knocked down, but there was no one around, and she realized she didn't even hear anyone else make a noise or fall too. Those are the only stories I have of my tia and nana, but moving on. So I had 5 dogs at the time of all of this, and all of them would look upstairs and growl, bark, and just watch it very intently. One time my poodle went upstairs, and something hurt her very badly. We had to get a cast for her paw because it seemed something crushed her paw. The last small story before we get back to the main story is about my friends. To this day, they say that the night they spent in the loft is the scariest moment for all of them. You see, there were 4 of them, and the first time they came over was when everything barely started happening. I had them sleep in the loft, and they all said that a tall, sheeted man was harassing them all night and scaring them. At the time they were the only ones to see his face, and they said half his face looked cut off. My friends would come over almost every weekend, but after that moment, they refused to go anywhere near the loft. Now, to get back on track, after some time, I started to see visions in my sleep of Alice's death. She was taken by the sheeted man and brought to another man who wore a very dirty suit. He looked very disorganized, but he had Freddy Krueger-type gloves and slashed Alice. I kept seeing this over and over until one day, I saw the killer. When I had to take a shower, I would have to cross the loft, and there I saw him, crawling on all 4s and staring at me intently, with so much hate. He gave off an even more sinister presence than the white sheet. He was pure evil, and something I would rather not deal with anymore. Unlike the white sheet, killer never attacked anyone, yet his presence was a constant source of terror. Have you seen the movie Insidious and the scene where the medium draws the demon on the ceiling? He's similar to that, and he even would crawl up the walls like that. After he started to show himself, my dad saw him and actually started to sleep downstairs instead of in his room because of how often he was seeing him in the room and scaring my dad. My sister was getting super stressed from everything and told Alice she wasn't helping anymore. My sister never saw Alice after that. For me there wasn't anything I could even do. I was too scared to even look at the men, and I was getting mentally damaged from seeing them all the time that I told Alice I was done too. I was 15 then, and Alice looked sad and disappointed at that and told me goodbye. I didn't want her to leave, but I couldn't stop her, and she vanished, and that was the last I saw of her and the 2 men. Things actually calmed down a little bit, but my family started to break down. My parents divorced because my brother almost died in college, and my dad refused to travel to see him, and my mom never forgave him for that. My sister suffered from major depression and bipolar disorder and even PTSD from everything. As for me, the events from Alice and the men and other personal stuff drove me to a breaking point, and I developed paranoid schizophrenia. The paranoia of not seeing the men anymore, the feeling of dread and death lingered and drove the development. The spirits mixed with anger and hatred from everyone built and broke everyone. We decided we needed to move on from that house, so we moved to where we are now. Now everything seems to be fine. My brother is in good health, my sister lives in Seattle pursuing her dream of music production, my mom and dad decided it was best to live together still, and I am making comics professionally. The anger and fear in the old house were too much for my family to handle. Now we still have paranormal activity, but a complete 180 compared to that old house. If I were to give advice to anyone about spirits, never help them, as sometimes they will pull you and everyone else into something none of you have the power to help with. Thank you. When I was in 5th grade, I got a Ouija board. I grew up with my dad telling me about weird things that happened to him as a kid, so he was cool with it. That summer I had 2 things that were really weird. The first was when I was playing with it with my best friend, she took it as seriously as I did. We were outside, and it was probably 9 p.m. We asked how old the spirit was when it died. We heard a baby crying nearby. None of my neighbors had babies or kids old enough to have babies, plus none of my neighbors were outside. We asked how it died. Suddenly we heard a loud boom and saw a bright light. We don't remember running to the front door, but once we got to the door, we were holding hands, looking at each other, terrified. We ran upstairs and asked my parents if they heard the explosion. They said no and continued doing whatever they were doing. For years my friend and I would confirm this experience with each other to make sure, and it was always the same. Well, that same summer I was sleeping. And I woke up to someone calling my name. It sounded like it was coming from outside. My bedroom was on the 3rd floor, my window and in my head at the same time. I looked outside and saw a girl around my age wearing a communion dress telling me to come outside and play. I was freaked out and ran back to bed and under my covers. Furthermore, my entire life I would always see a black shadow run under my bed at the corner of my bed, always the same spot. I had cats, so I always thought it was just the cat, but sometimes I'd look and my cat wasn't under the bed or even in my room. I'd go downstairs and see the cat sleeping in my parents' room. When I got to college, I went into a spiritual shop, and a woman walked up to me and asked if I had any cats that died. I said yes, and she smiled and said, "I can tell they're all around you, rubbing against you lovingly." I instantly smiled and started crying. It made me so happy to know that. Even in my dorm room, I would be half awake in the morning and sometimes feel the pressure of a cat jumping on my bed and curling up between my legs. I stopped experiencing any paranormal activity until a couple of years ago when I was at my boyfriend's uncle's house. It was a beautiful farmhouse in PA. My BF was helping fix it up and just moved into it a couple of days before, so he just had a mattress in the living room. I got there late. He told me he had to keep the radio playing classical music or weird shit would start to happen. I ignored it, but when I finally went to lay down and sleep, I kept feeling like someone was watching us. I ignored it because I was exhausted. Soon after, his dog slowly got out of bed and stood by the door leading into the kitchen and started growling, then would turn around and come back to bed. This happened multiple times throughout the night. A week or 2 later I came by with my dog to help clean the bathroom upstairs and some of the rooms. This time his uncle came by and told us he just bought the property and took us to see the back building, something you'd see on a farm that might hold farm equipment, a big metal structure. As soon as I walked inside, I got a horrible feeling of heaviness and dread. I was overwhelmed with sadness. I had to walk out. I had never felt that before. My boyfriend's uncle then tells us the previous owners would do dogfighting in the back building, which was part of a makeup company. They tested products on animals inside. I did see some long metal rails with a drainage thing underneath. The death, pain, and sadness from those poor animals still lingered there. It made sense why I felt that way. Every time I was in the bathroom, especially taking a shower, I felt like a man was watching me. It was creepy. When I would shower, I could feel and sense and even saw the faint outline of a man wearing a hat. I later learned about the hatman. That's what it looked like. I felt like any minute he would open the curtain, and I would have to yell at him to give me some privacy when I'm in the shower. He had an ominous vibe, but I made sure to not show fear as much as possible. That night, my BF moved into a small side apartment next to the main house. I had my dog with me. We had to keep his dog in the main house because he did not like my dog. He had a pit bull, and I have a cattle dog. Well, he went in to shower and was very strict about locking the door anytime you entered or left the houses. Well, I was lying in bed reading when I saw the door slowly open. I looked up to say something to him. Instead, I saw his dog. The dog saw mine and lunged at her. She was lying next to me. I had to hold his dog and my dog by the collars while lying down. I had a summer dress on, and I was half on and off the bed with my legs in the air and the dress over my head. Seconds later he runs in and grabs his dog. Luckily, somehow, neither the dog nor I was hurt. Somehow his dog was able to unlock the man's door and this house's door. I was convinced that the hat man was messing with me. My BF said he had actually turned off the radio when he went to shower because he kept hearing things like someone walking around. Staying in that house was wild. A child that I saw on the bridge. I live in the Philippines, so walking great distances isn't really a big surprise, especially with all the traffic that this country has to offer. It was around 11:30 p.m. and I decided to go to the nearest 7-Eleven in my town because my cousin wouldn't shut up about wanting to get a tub of ice cream before watching Netflix together. It wasn't that far, but I needed to walk over a bridge to get there, and that particular bridge had over a dozen haunting paranormal stories. The bridge was just old wooden planks nailed together, and it's slightly dangerous because it's old, moldy, and just over a meter in width. Of course, there was no one outside anymore because the people here believe that there was a ghost who pushes anyone who tries to cross the bridge after 10 p.m. towards the lake at the bottom. But I wasn't that superstitious, so I just walked over to that bridge. The creepy thing is, the bridge had this sharp turning corner to give way to a house, and the hauntings are said to usually occur in that spot. I was chatting with my cousin on my phone, but I stopped when I was about to step on the bridge. I looked up, and I swear I almost screamed loudly. I saw this small child not far away from me, standing on the exact turning corner of the bridge. She was wearing a white dress, had long black hair, and had pitch black eyes. I had my glasses on, and it was a full moon, so I was more than sure that the white part in her eyes was missing. There were just two black voids. The child started to walk towards me, so I ran back towards the direction that I came from. When I looked behind me, she was gone. I just returned home that night and told my cousin what happened. She too was scared because 3 of our childhood friends experienced being pushed over that bridge long ago. She thinks that that child is the one at fault. What do you guys think? Have you guys ever experienced anything like this? Paranormal stalker. I lived in a house in a small town in Kentucky from the time I was 7 until I was 11 years old. I am female and now 41 years old. I apologize ahead of time, my tale will be a long one, but bear with me as the incidents range from small and escalate. The ending to this story baffled me and still does today. Let's dive into the core of the story. My family and I moved to Carrollton, Kentucky, in 1987 and rented a house on Highland Avenue. The house was a 1-story, 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom with a concrete basement. The occurrences didn't start right off. After about a year of living there, I was taking a bath, and when I was done, I always had a habit of not putting my towel up or unplugging the drain. My mom would yell at me endlessly for this. The last time she did, she told me I would be grounded if I did it again. Well, that night I had my bath and went into my room to the left of the bathroom. I was getting ready for bed when I remembered I had forgotten the towel and the drain again. Not wanting to be grounded, I panicked and ran into the bathroom to put up the towel and unplug the drain before my mom found out I hadn't done it. As I stepped into the bathroom, the first thing I noticed was the towel hanging up. Confused, I look into the bathtub, and the water has been let out. I was confused because my bedroom faces the living room, and I always left my door open a little. I never saw either of my parents walk past my room and enter the bathroom, and I am an only child, so there was no one else that could have done it. I knew it wasn't my mom because had she found the bathroom a mess, she would have lit into me the second she saw it. She was a no-nonsense kind of person. I went back to my bedroom still confused and trying to figure out how that could have happened. The only conclusion I could reach, which still made no sense, was that my dad had gone into the bathroom to handle the situation, and I simply hadn't noticed him. He was always covering for me. I knew that wasn't the case, but at that point, a made-up explanation was better than no explanation. The next day the very same thing happened again. I chose to dig my head into the sand and ignore it. Nothing happened for about a month, and then one day I was sitting on my toy chest in my room putting my shoes on for school. Abruptly, I sensed someone in the basement tapping a broom handle on the ceiling beneath my feet. I heard 3 separate taps in succession. I looked down the hall to my parents' bedroom, which was on the right side of the bathroom, and saw my mom asleep. Trying to rationalize the fear away, I yelled for my dad, hoping he was playing a prank on me. My heart sank when I heard his voice from the bathroom reply back to me. I went to school and essentially forgot about it. The very next day the same thing happened again. I again went to school and forgot about it. I believed that by continuing to ignore the situation, it would eventually disappear. A few weeks later my aunt and uncle were supposed to come out to visit from Louisville. My parents left me alone for a few minutes to run to the store for a few items before my aunt and uncle got there. Keep in mind, this was the 80s, and it was typical for a 9-year-old to be allowed to be left home alone for short periods. I was super excited for my aunt and uncle to come out, and I sat in the living room watching TV and waiting. The window I sat next to looked out onto the carport where we would walk up to the door and enter the kitchen. A shadow caught my attention on the carport headed toward the door, and it looked like a tall man. I was so excited thinking, yay, they're here. I jumped up and ran to the door and threw it open, ready to hug my aunt and uncle. My stomach leapt into my throat when I looked out and no one was there. It turns out that my aunt and uncle were unable to visit that week and had to reschedule their trip. I couldn't make sense of it because I had just watched a man walk past me out the window. I don't know why I never told my parents. I guess I was afraid they wouldn't believe me. I also figured if I ignored it, it would go away. I was wrong. Things seemed to escalate the more I ignored it, and the activity picked up like crazy over the next year. I would hear growls in my room at night while trying to fall asleep. I would cover my head with my blanket and shake in fear until I fell asleep. There were nights I could feel someone at the end of my bed, and it would grab a hold of the bedposts and pull the bed and shove it back against the wall. I knew I wasn't crazy because a couple of times my mom would yell out to me, "What are you doing? You are supposed to be asleep." I told her nothing and covered my head again as if that were going to protect me until I fell asleep. Things stopped for a few months, and one day I was in the basement playing on my drawing easel. We had a very large, heavy trash can in the corner of the basement next to the washer. All of a sudden, the trash can started tipping and shaking violently. I looked at it and waited for an animal to come running out, but it never did. I didn't hear an animal trying to get out of the trash can or make any noise. I just watched the trash can going crazy. This time, I screamed. I screamed so loud, and my mom came running down the stairs. I was in tears and shaking and refused to take my eyes away from the trash can because I was scared it was going to attack me or something. I told my mom that something was in the trash can. At this point it had stopped shaking. It stopped as soon as my mom opened the basement door. She looked in the trash can, behind the washer and dryer, and in all the corners. There was nothing there. I refused to ever go down into the basement again. We moved due to unforeseen circumstances, not because of the house's activity, which slowed again for a few months. I was 11 years old at this point, and by the end of November, we had moved into our new house in the next town over. Nothing happened for a few weeks, and then one morning I saw a shadow move in my mom and dad's room. It went from my dad's side of the bed toward the bathroom in their room. I thought my mom was up and waited for her to come out. My dad was already at work, and I had just been sitting in the living room watching TV. She never came out of the bedroom, and then it dawned on me that I never heard the bed squeak like it always did very loudly anytime someone got in or out of it. I went back to the bedroom to check on my mom, and she was sound asleep. She had never gotten out of bed. The same thing happened for the next few days and stopped. We had our Christmas tree up, as it was December at this point. The tree was in the living room in front of the bay window that overlooks the front yard. The couch was on the wall adjacent to it. I was sitting on the couch about 7 feet from the Christmas tree. Suddenly, a tree limb snapped like a plucked guitar string. The shaking was so intense that an ornament fell off the limb and hit the floor. Neither the limb nor the ornament broke, but it was terrifying to watch it shake. I ran into my room, and that is where I stayed most of the day. This happened a few more times over the next few days, and I had finally had enough. This is where the part that baffles me comes into play. As I said, I finally had enough, and I said out loud, "Okay. Okay. I know you are here, and I know you followed me. What do you want? What do you want?" And that is where the story ends. After I said that, there was never again any activity, shadows, or growls. It was like nothing was ever there. Why, after all those years, is that what it took to make it go away? My experiences as a child and teenager. 1. I lived in a haunted house as a child. I was 9 to 10. It was the second house we lived in a new town we had moved to not long before. 2-story creepy-ass looking house. It was weird from the beginning. We found wigs everywhere. But we brushed it off, my mom, sisters, and I. My stepdad and stepbrother really didn't care. They remained unfazed. What's crazy is the kids at school would gasp and say, "Your house is haunted," when I told them where I lived. I didn't really believe them and got offended. Wish I would have asked why they thought that now, though. Little kids' brains are weird. My first experience happened when it was just me and my mom at home. I ran upstairs to get something. I noticed the bathroom door was shut, the lights were on, and the shower was on. I just figured my stepbrother had come home. I grabbed something off my dresser, ran down the stairs, Realized I forgot something, ran back up, and the door to the bathroom was open, the shower was off, and the light was off. Nobody was up there, though. Now keep in mind it took about 10 seconds to run down and right back up the stairs. The second event that occurred was the most terrifying paranormal experience of my life. I was upstairs alone getting ready for bed. My mom, stepdad, and baby sister were downstairs in bed. My stepbrother and other sister were gone. As I prepare to lay down in my bed, I suddenly hear my stepdad's sing-songy voice from the bottom of the stairs calling my name, K-Love. I yell back, K-Love. What? K-Love. What? By this time I'm starting to get fed up and I'm thinking, why doesn't he just come up here or tell me what he wants? So I'm about to get off the bed when his voice changes. It sounds like two voices are wrapped together. Like an old woman and just pure evil. Right when I heard it, I froze. It started screaming my name at the top of its lungs. K-Love, 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 and just repeating it over and over. I jumped under my covers, and it finally stopped. I was too scared to scream for my parents. I had no way to get out of the room, and I damn sure wasn't going down the stairs. We have a door at the bottom of the stairs, and I never heard it open or close. Never heard footsteps. But I somehow fell asleep. I woke up in the morning, relieved I was still alive. I didn't tell my parents about either of these incidents. The third one, I'm not sure if it was really paranormal, but it was freaky. My baby sister had her bed next to mine. She rarely slept there, but this night she did. I woke up to my parents rushing up the stairs. My mom was crying. They grabbed my sister. I was like, what is going on? My mom said she had a dream my sister's head was stuck in between our beds, and when she came up there, her head was in between our beds. She wasn't dying or anything like in my mom's dream, but her dream was right. My mom and dad slept in my room that night, and when my mom thought I was asleep, she started talking about the house being haunted. She said she would hear old-time music coming from upstairs at night and stuff. Besides all that, the whole air about the house was creepy. My parents started fighting all the time. My baby sister also said she'd seen stuff in my brother's room. She was really young, but she is still adamant about what she saw. We have recently tried to look into the history of the house and tried to get in touch with the kids from school, but nothing. It's torn down now and has been for a long time. I don't think anyone lived there after us. 2. My second experience is just more odd than scary. We lived back in our hometown at this time. I was 12 to 13. I was using the bathroom one evening. My family was all in the living room. I had the door open because I always left doors open, lol. My room is right next to the bathroom. I hear a loud crash. Jump off the toilet, wipe, and run to my room. An Easter basket that I had, full of stuff, was all the way across the room on the floor. Everything spilled out of it. The thing of it is, my basket was at the back of my dresser with stuff in front of it. So how did it end up across the room, and nothing in front of it was moved? 3. The third experience involves my best friend. It was summer. We were 14 or 15. It was after church one night, we were walking home. Stopped at the elementary school just to take a break and hang out. Our youth pastor drove by. She was going to get something to eat and bring us back some fries. So we moved towards the middle of the playground. Sitting on the ground, talking and laughing. All of a sudden this old woman's voice yells, "Get out." We just freeze, look at each other, and take off. I still remember exactly what I was saying when it happened. We lost our flip-flops from running so fast, and going back to get them was scary as duck too. Lol, anyway, the voice sounded like it came from right behind us in a doorway. The lights were all off. No cars were there. It was around 10 at night in the summer. And people I've told said it was probably a worker ducking with us or something, but I don't believe that. We were just there for so long, sitting in that spot. Doors never opened. If it was someone scaring us, they would have had to have been hiding in the doorway before we got there. 4. The next one was when I and my best friend were 15. We were staying the night at a friend's sleepover. We were sleeping in her brother's room. It had a bathroom connected to it too. So me and my best friend end up on the floor by the bathroom. All the lights are out. We're just all talking among ourselves, trying to settle down. Well, I and my best friend just happened to look in the bathroom at the same time. Both of us jump up screaming and running and tripping all over everybody. We've seen the exact same thing. A girl crawling on the floor towards us. She looked like the girl from The Ring with her hair in her face, and she was crawling, decrepit, on her legs and arms. It was terrifying. And nobody else saw it or believed us. That is my second most terrifying paranormal experience. And even now my best friend can perfectly describe what it looked like. Exactly matches my memory. Another time I was at a friend's and lying on the bed in the dark and heard someone clearly say my name. I don't really count this, though, because maybe I was just hearing things. I only heard it say my name one time. 5. My BF and I moved into a cute little house when I was 18. I had my first son there. Weird things were happening after a while. My dolphin knickknacks would move. I heard weird noises. I just always felt uncomfortable, and I hate saying that, but I did. But I still loved the house. One day I was by myself listening to music, and the dial moved by itself. The station cut out and was switched to country. Lol. It scared the shit out of me, though. I ran out of the house to my boyfriend's grandma's. Thereafter, I asked my landlord if anyone had died. He said, an old man. I wasn't scared for the most part, though. I thought he was a nice old man. So I told my whole family my house was haunted. They were always at my house and never experienced anything and didn't believe me. Well, we moved out, and my aunt and cousin moved in about a year later. Things took quite a while to start up. It started with my cousin waking up with long, deep-ass scratches on her boobs and other body parts. I remember when she told me. We tried to rationalize it, but she was scared. It got worse than I had ever imagined it could be. Doors would open by themselves when my aunt got home. The shower curtain got pulled open while my cousin was in the shower. I didn't really believe until my cousin B started experiencing shit. He is very down to earth. Military. Doesn't make shit up and is really not scared of much. He was awakened in the middle of the night by a man above his bed growling at him. My other cousin took pictures and recorded on her phone. One picture was of a little boy in the closet. It looked exactly like a real boy except in a long black cloak with a white orb. One on each side of his head. It was just crazy. My grandma and grandpa had their preacher come and pray, which just made things worse. There were many times they would stay the night at my grandparents' just to get away from the house. When they were at the house, they all three slept in one room. My mom and sister went over there towards the end, and my sister told me that shit actually happened while they were there. They had a paranormal team come in, and I'm not really sure if they found anything. I was sure one of them told me no, but I had my cousin, their other sister who was not living there at the time, cut my hair last week, and she told me that they actually did find stuff. That there were a whole lot of different entities trapped in that house. She even got her friend involved because it had been his granddad that died in the house. The paranormal team said that his grandpa was still there. Along with plenty of non-human entities. I don't understand why it was so bad for them and not for me. My aunt had my mom ask me if I had ever played with a Ouija board or anything while we lived there. Well, hell no. I don't know why it was so evil for them and not for me. Maybe because I wasn't really scared. I'm not sure. And thereafter, I haven't experienced anything paranormal at all. That I know, lol, and I kind of wonder why. Don't get me wrong, I'm glad. I just wonder why. What was it all for? My views on the paranormal have kind of changed. I'm not really sure what it is. Not sure if I believe in ghosts. I just know what happened to me was real. And it has shaped most of my beliefs, especially the belief that things aren't always what they seem to be. Life is not as clear-cut as we think it is. Things happen that, by science, should not be able to.